300 years ago, the lands of Joseon trembled from a war the world had never seen before. A war between humans and monsters from the most terrifying nightmares. But amidst the chaos and darkness, a hero emerged, whose name even monsters whispered. He was called the Devourer for his ability to destroy the undead as if they were his food. Centuries later in our time, fate brought two strangers together on a narrow street. A kind-hearted priest, Steve, and an elderly woman, hunched under the weight of her bag. Moved by compassion and faith, Steve offered his help. The journey ahead was not short, up a steep slope, as if testing his spirit and body. Having overcome most of the ascent, Steve apologetically acknowledged the limits of his strength. But the old woman showed no sign of displeasure. After all, her grandson was supposed to meet her ahead. As a token of gratitude, she insisted that Steve accept a treat from her, a cocktail. While Steve enjoyed the drink, the grandmother proudly talked about her grandson, a doctor. His brilliant mind manifested itself at the age of 3 when he mastered the Korean alphabet. But there was worry in her voice. He had gotten involved with bad company, drowning in debt. Suddenly, the world darkened for Steve, and he lost consciousness. The old woman, not interrupting her monologue, now spoke of something entirely different, about how the priest's organs would save many lives, and his soul would be rewarded in heaven. Her good-natured smile turned into a predatory grin. Soon, Steve's body found itself on an operating table. The grandson doctor, initially dissatisfied with the quality of the victim, grudgingly took up the scalpel under his grandmother's nagging. But when the blade touched Steve's skin, something unthinkable happened. Something emerged from the incision that made the doctor recoil in horror against the wall. Right from the priest's flesh rose a female figure, like a nightmare taking form. The creature, imprisoned for 3 centuries, finally breathed the air of freedom. In gratitude for the involuntary liberation, the demoness gifted the grandmother and grandson. Her hair, piercing into their bodies, transformed them into monsters. The old woman became Hong Kong undead, and her grandson a demon wrestler, both of the 3rd physical class. The demoness turned to Steve, calling him by his true name, the Devourer, hunter of monsters. She offered him to join the side of darkness. But in response, the Devourer, whose wounds had miraculously healed, merely bit off the demon's finger. A fierce battle began. The newly converted monsters stood to defend their mistress. Soon the Devourer found himself under a barrage of attacks. But the demoness, watching the hunter's beating, felt strange regret. She wanted not to kill him, but to win him over to her side. However, seeing his steadfastness, she made a decision. She would have to eat her enemy. The demoness, writhing like a snake, extended her living hair towards the Devourer's face. Her hair mercilessly tore at his flesh in search of the treasure that had been legendary for centuries. And there it was, a bright blue sphere, pulsating with ancient power, the source of the Devourer's might. Without a moment's hesitation, she swallowed the artifact. With each moment as the sphere dissolved into her being, life left Steve. His skin wrinkled, hair grayed, and strength drained away like water through fingers. The demoness reveled in the new sensation, savoring the taste of every monster the Devourer had consumed. But even on the brink of destruction, Steve didn't give up. In a desperate attempt to save himself, he employed his most unexpected art, concentrating his last strength through his rear end. Like a comet, he soared into the sky, leaving his enemies far behind. The demoness, understanding the futility of pursuit, decided to focus on more important matters, namely to announce her return to the world. Possessing the title of Monster Summoner, the Hell's Undead prepared to turn the world into a semblance of hell. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a different drama was unfolding. On his birthday, Henry, a fragile and sickly thin young man, became the victim of a cruel joke. His former friend Jason, now turned into a merciless bully, came with birthday wishes. He forced him to consume mountains of sweets, filming the humiliation on camera. Their story was full of bitter betrayal. They grew up together in the same neighborhood, being each other's only support. But they drifted apart in high school when Jason inexplicably changed. After eating 15 buns, Henry faced the task of consuming another 35. He couldn't refuse. If he got sick, he would be forced to eat even his own vomit. Hope for salvation glimmered when Jason received an invitation to drink with classmates. But the bully only tightened the conditions. 5 minutes for the remaining buns. When it was all over and the group left, the exhausted Henry threw up. In his depleted mind pulsed the question, why did his body remain painfully thin? Suddenly, his attention was drawn to strange sounds. Around the corner, he discovered a barely alive old man, the same Steve. When Henry reached for his phone to call an ambulance, the old man grabbed his hand. He told the boy about the awakened demon and the impending opening of Hell's gates. In a final desperate gesture, Steve proposed the unthinkable, to eat him. Before Henry could react, the old man unnaturally stretched the young man's mouth. He slowly began to enter his body, explaining that he was transferring the Devourer's power. Now, for the sake of saving humanity, Henry had to become the new monster hunter. Just as the incredible transformation completed, a drunk Jason appeared. He came with a new batch of entertainment, bottles of alcohol. Unaware of the changes in his victim, he was anticipating the continuation of his torments. But now Henry's frightened gaze was fixed not on the bottles. His mouth, obeying the new power, began to act on its own, preparing to devour his tormentor. Jason recoiled backward, breaking free from the grip of the unnaturally stretched mouth. Henry, trembling with horror, showered apologies, insisting he hadn't controlled what happened. But in Jason's eyes now splashed a different fear. He recognized the devourer in his former victim. Henry himself, it seemed, didn't even suspect his new status. Seeing his chance in this ignorance, Jason suddenly changed. His human face distorted, transforming into a beast muzzle. He turned out to be a monster of the 7th physical class, the Hunter Hound. With animal fury, he lunged at the confused Henry, using everything in reach as a weapon. Jason growled between blows at his own luck. The Devourer's sphere had ended up with such a weakling. All he had to do was swallow him whole, and all that power would be his. But when his inquiries about the sphere's whereabouts yielded no results, he decided to act directly. The monster's enormous maw opened before Henry, ready to swallow him whole. At that moment, a commanding voice echoed in Henry's mind, ordering him to fight. The voice claimed that this was just a monster, while Henry was the ultimate predator. But how could someone fight who had spent his whole life enduring humiliation, silently suffering through the torment? Someone who believed that one day the nightmare would simply end on its own? The voice insisted that if Henry continued to just endure, he would die. It reminded him that he was now a devourer and had to clench his fists. One strike, and Jason's strong arm shattered into splinters. The monster recoiled, unable to believe his eyes. Henry's next blow took off his head, but even decapitated, the Hunter Hound refused to surrender. His head transformed into a small dog, desperately trying to escape. The Hunter Hound whimpered, begging Henry to talk, reminding him of their friendship, swearing it was all just a joke. But it was too late. The new Devourer's jaws closed around the monster, putting an end to its existence. Kneeling after his first hunt, Henry prayed that it was all just a nightmare. But the voice from his stomach, now taking the shape of a face near his navel, shattered that hope. Steve explained that Jason had been possessed by a monster that fed on human fears. Steve went on to explain the two ways monsters consume people. They either devoured flesh and soul directly or drained life through fear. But for every predator, there existed a higher predator, the devourer. Now it was his fate, just as it had been Steve's 300 years ago. History was repeating itself, and he had to stop them all. The next day at school, Henry noticed Jason's absence. It was a painful confirmation of the reality of what had happened. His friends, out of habit, bullied Henry into going to get food. But a sudden pain in his stomach drove him to the bathroom, where bitter memories overwhelmed him. After all, Jason hadn't always been a monster. Once he had defended Henry from bullies, comforted and supported him. One time, when first graders had torn Henry's pants, Jason had unhesitatingly taken off his own shirt. He had used it to fashion an improvised piece of clothing for his friend. Now, however, Henry was consumed by the despair of realizing he had killed his friend. But suddenly, Henry heard a strange sound. A bright light began emanating from the toilet beneath him. When Henry stood up to check the source, horror engulfed him. He had quite literally defecated his former best friend. Meanwhile, tension was building in the classroom. The lead bully, losing patience, paced the room, searching for Henry. The absence of their usual victim was getting under his skin. The weakling still hadn't shown up with the food. Suddenly, the teacher entered the room, politely suggesting they start the lesson. But the arrogant teenagers immediately pointed out that there were still 3 minutes left before the bell. The teacher's calm tone as he explained the misalignment of his watch only fueled their insolence. The bully shouted about a violation of their human rights, unaware of the irony of his words. The teacher, insulted by these little pigs talking about rights, turned toward the exit. But his retreat was merely a ruse, as the teenagers, sensing a false victory, pulled out their phones. They were preparing to record yet another complaint about the teacher. But their triumph was cut short by a deafening explosion. Outside the window, something beyond comprehension was unfolding. The bully laughed nervously, suggesting that they were filming a movie. Only one girl in the class dared to object, saying that no CGI could possibly be outside their windows. At that moment, the teacher's phone rang. An unnatural smile lit up his face. The teacher cheerfully announced the arrival of his master, whom he had awaited for 300 years. His body began to distort, grow. He explained to the students that humans had always been nothing more than food for demons, and now they had returned. The fourth class illusion monster, the teacher, touched a student's forehead with a long claw. A chilling laugh spread through the classroom as the newly turned one joined in. The girl, who had only moments ago doubted the reality of what was happening, watched in horror. But suddenly her bully friend lunged at her, infecting her with the same madness. One by one, the students became part of the nightmarish hive. They were all united by unnatural smiles, just like their masters. Meanwhile, in the restroom, Henry faced the impossible. In front of him stood Jason, but not the monster he had devoured, but the confused boy from the past. Jason only remembered walking home with Henry and being bitten by a dog. He was also panicked by a strange tattoo on his arm that wouldn't fade. Trying to test his friend's authenticity and memory, Henry asked him about their class. Jason confidently answered, "Third year of middle school," though they had long since been in high school. But the real difference lay in the details. This Jason called him by his name, not weakling, like the monster-possessed version had. To be absolutely sure, Henry mentioned Jason's favorite game, Stage Over Legends. He named his supposed favorite character, Timo. The reaction was instant. Jason flared up, completely bewildered by the claim. His eyes showed genuine outrage at the misnaming of his favorite character. Tears of joy streamed down Henry's face. His best friend had truly returned. Unable to explain everything at once, Henry simply promised to bring him a gym uniform. But outside the restroom door, a nightmare awaited him. The school hallways were filled with beings wearing unnatural smiles. The monster teacher, noticing Henry, burst into laughter, declaring that he had dared to break away from the herd. A foolish choice. Driven back into the restroom, Henry rushed to the window, but Jason's voice stopped him. His friend clutched his head, tormented by sudden memories. Flashes of cruelty, mocking Henry, helpless sobbing. Henry's mind recalled that fateful day. They had been on their way to the computer club. Jason, upset over his rank dropping, had asked for Henry's help. Suddenly, a stray dog appeared, aggressive, without a muzzle. When it lunged at Henry, Jason, without hesitation, shielded his friend with his own body. The bite changed everything. Jason had confessed that he felt better than ever. As Henry examined the wound, he had no idea that a monster had already entered his friend's body. Now, hearing the creatures breaking down the door, Henry remembered Steve's words. Henry recalled the warning that patience would lead to death. He handed his clothes to Jason and thanked him for protecting such a weakling all those years. Henry declared that Jason's actions had been the monster's doing, then opened the door to face the nightmare. The monster teacher smirked, praising the obedient cattle, and promised to devour Henry personally. But something had changed in the boy's eyes. Fear still gripped him as he faced the monster, but he realized there would be no more running. He was the ultimate predator, the new devourer, and it was time to prove it. On the day of the school's chaos, high-ranking politicians visited a Buddhist shaman. Their visit, masked by polite inquiries about her well-being, had a different purpose. They sought another ritual to secure victory in the elections. Every 5 years, they came to her for a presidential blessing. The shaman, speaking of the universal need for peaceful times, scattered grains of rice. But her smile froze. Her vision revealed the impossible. In a year, there would be no ruler in the country. Suddenly, the vision was flooded with images of a monstrous invasion outside the window. Maintaining her composure, the shaman issued an order to her assistant, Evelina. "Arm all shamanic assistants. The monsters dare to set foot on my land." Meanwhile, in the school, Henry was surrounded by a crowd of possessed students. He tried to find within himself the same strength that had helped him defeat Jason. The monster teacher, amused, unleashed his army of zombified children upon him. Henry hesitated. They weren't monsters, they were his classmates. Swallowed by the crowd, Henry fell into oblivion, where Steve awaited him. The devourer demanded an explanation. Why was Henry allowing himself to be eaten, warning him that soon only his bones would remain? Henry explained that they were still people, and while some had bullied him, there were also those who had tried to help, like Jason before he became a monster. That's why he couldn't harm them. humans were not monsters. Steve nodded in satisfaction. The boy had passed the test. It was time to reveal the truth. He explained that monsters entered the world through tiny cracks in the underworld. They shed their physical forms, turning into ghostly soul flames. In this state, they wandered, searching for human hosts. But after a year of possession, a full transformation occurred. The human soul became trapped, and only the Devourer's stomach could save it. But Steve didn't forget to mention one condition. The Devourer must not harbor hatred for humans. Otherwise, the human soul would dissolve along with the monster. Henry had proven the purity of his heart. Now the old man revealed the true source of the Devourer's power. It was hunger. Awakening, Henry felt it, a devouring, maddening hunger. His stomach was like a bottomless abyss, demanding to be fed. The monster teacher realized too late who stood before him. The Devourer's bottomless maw was already tearing off his arm. As he chewed the demonic flesh, Henry felt a strange energy spread through his body. The taste was incredible, and the power filling him with each bite was intoxicating. Meanwhile, screens across the city broadcast the nightmare live. In the center of the metropolis stood a being whose very presence shattered reality. A demoness, lounging among the remains of her victims, watched the events with interest. Her lips curled into a smile. She could feel the insatiable hunger tormenting her fellow monster. Fearless journalists risked their lives, approaching the creature in helicopters. In the spotlight's glare, its body writhed like a serpent, but the human face gave the being an especially eerie look. Suddenly, the monster turned to one of the cameras, and its mouth twisted in a grimace of pain and hunger. A human voice thundered from its monstrous maw, declaring how long it had gone without eating. In the next instant, the air was filled with thousands of writhing worms. They attacked the helicopters, tearing through metal like paper, then swarmed toward the panicked people below. Watching the events unfold, the Buddhist shaman swiftly assessed the situation. Her orders to the president were clear: seize control of all information channels at any cost. It didn't matter how, money, threats, his position, they had to do it. The official bowed in respect but dared to ask about the nature of the creature. The shaman explained that monsters had always been near, gazing out the window at the chaos. Behind every act of violence, every brutal crime, stood them. Some fed on fear and souls, others craved flesh. But one this massive, this was something new. A report came in over the radio from the rapid response team. The shaman ordered the activation of the exorcism protocol, the only way to deal with the monster. From a combat aircraft, an elite team of exorcists parachuted in, led by Evelina. The captain shouted to her troops about the need to place 10 exorcism seals. She reminded them of the brevity of life and the eternity of the afterlife in the Buddhist paradise. The warriors charged toward the monster, dodging tentacles and dying one by one. When the final seal was set in place, Evelina plunged 2 sacred swords into the creature. A helicopter carrying musicians hovered nearby, filling the air with ancient sounds. The girl pulled out a ritual fan and bells, beginning the soul-exorcising chant. Her voice, amplified by faith and magic, reached into the very essence of the monster. The creature shuddered. Bloody tears streamed from its eyes. Meanwhile, in the school hallways, another battle was unfolding. Henry, having just devoured the monster teacher's arm, felt power surging through his body. The monster teacher, watching him, recalled the demoness's words about the devoured devourer's sphere. A thought flashed through the monster's mind. The boy was just an empty shell without energy. But Henry's frail hand stopped the monster's powerful strike. Anger flickered in the boy's eyes as he declared that he wasn't full yet. Henry's counterattack sent black blood gushing from the monster teacher's maw. Realization struck the monster like lightning. He had catastrophically underestimated his opponent. Even without the sphere, this child was a true devourer. In a desperate attempt to buy time, the monster struck Henry in the stomach and fled. While running, he activated a link to the rescue group, the parasitic entities in his eyes. The negotiation was brief and humiliating. The creatures, whining about hunger and weakness, demanded payment for their help. They bargained over their hunger, trying to secure better terms. Seeing Henry approaching, drool dripping from his mouth, the monster teacher panicked. He was ready to offer 100 human heads in exchange for killing his opponent. Encouraged by the promise of a feast, the parasites erupted from his eyes like lightning bolts. Their strikes rained down on Henry, knocking him off his feet and causing searing pain. But when the boy began to fight back, the tiny monsters realized their mistake. A foe capable of stopping their attacks with his bare hands was worth far more than 100 lives. One of the parasites whispered to its master that the terms of the contract needed to be renegotiated. In the midst of the fateful ritual, Evelina faced the unexpected. Unwilling to accept its fate, the monster spewed forth serpents that unleashed a barrage of attacks. The warriors, recognizing the critical moment, formed a living shield. They sacrificed themselves to protect the young spellcaster, striving to save humanity. The monster's desperate protests echoed through the air, but its confidence in its own immortality crumbled to dust as Evelina completed the incantation. In a spectacular burst of magical energy, the creature was torn to bloody shreds. Having foreseen such an outcome, Evelina deployed her parachute just in time, soaring above the battlefield. The triumph was short-lived. A radio signal cut through the ether. The shaman reported the appearance of a new enemy, the monster teacher. This news sent ripples of alarm through the ranks of the defenders. The monster was of the 4th class. The situation was further complicated by the nature of monster classification. Each level signified a tenfold increase in threat. The monster teacher possessed an especially insidious ability, a corruption magic that turned people into half-monsters, continuing the cycle. Inside his body lurked parasitic guardians. Masters of martial arts, their combat prowess made them formidable foes. These beings wielded a unique technique, running between half-monsters. This allowed them to instantly move between infected hosts. Henry was drawn into a battle against these parasitic creatures. Their speed and precision made them practically invisible to the eye. They emerged unexpectedly from the eyes of infected victims, unleashing a torrent of attacks on him. Henry's attempts to counterattack were futile. The Guardians used their movement ability, remaining untouchable. His consciousness began to blur. Memories of Jason weighed heavily, while the situation spiraled further out of control. At the critical moment, Steve's voice cut through the haze of despair, revealing a secret to Henry. For 24 hours after devouring a monster, the Devourer could use its abilities. Steve reminded him of the monster hound Henry had defeated the day before, and its gift of keen scent. The Mentor's final words struck like a revelation. There was no monster the Devourer couldn't defeat. Closing his eyes and relying on his heightened senses, Henry detected the approach of another attack. A lightning-fast dodge followed by a swift counterstrike. And just like that, one of the parasitic guardians was trapped. Devouring his opponent opened up a whole new range of sensations. The air was filled with the enticing aromas of his potential victims. The second guardian, who had ventured too close, met the same fate as his comrade. But the most intoxicating scent came from the monster teacher himself. Realizing the loss of his minions, he began retreating, using the infected as a shield. But his desperate plan to reach the demoness for aid collapsed. His path was blocked by one of his own victims, a possessed student with a mysterious smile. In the moment of the monster teacher's hesitation, lightning erupted from the girl's eyes. Henry. He had used the monster's own favored tactic against him, jumping between infected hosts. Meanwhile, Evelina's unit arrived at the school. Her decision to surround the building with a barrier of rice caused concern among the warriors. Such protection wouldn't just trap the monster inside, it would cut off any chance of escape for the humans. But Evelina, hardened by battles against monsters, understood that there was no other way. Mercy and weakness were the very things monsters thrived on. The price of victory might be high, but there was no alternative. Inside the school, a true hunt was unfolding. Drunk on the power of the devoured guardians, Henry pursued the monster teacher with insatiable hunger. The monstrous aroma drove him mad, clouding his mind. Desperate, the monster teacher threw his infected followers at the devourer, but they only fueled his hunger, a tasteless snack compared to his true prey. Cornered by the barrier sealing all exits, the monster teacher tried to negotiate. He offered information on other monsters, promised an endless supply of half-monsters. But Henry, lost in the madness of hunger, responded by biting off the offered hand. To him, there was only one delicacy, the monster teacher himself. His scent overpowered all others. The final battle was swift. The monster teacher's attempt to consume Henry ended in his own demise. The devourer's bottomless maw swallowed the creature whole, leaving not a trace. Henry, intoxicated by the feast, snapped back to reality only when he saw Jason. His friend, horrified, defended himself with a mop. Every attempt to explain that he had saved the school was met with a wall of fear. Now his friend saw him only as a monster. Soon the awakening students stared in confusion at the bite marks on their bodies. They remembered nothing after the lesson began. Evelina, realizing the curse of the half-monsters had vanished, came to a troubling conclusion. A creature capable of defeating a fourth-class monster was lurking in the school. This was definitely something far more powerful than an ordinary human. 2 days later, the world returned to its usual routine. On a movie set, actors were recreating scenes of battles against monsters. The stunning realism of the special effects impressed journalists. But on social media, rumors of real monsters continued to spread. Hearing this, the film crew laughed it off, crediting everything to the brilliance of Korean special effects artists. They promised to make the monsters less terrifying to avoid unsettling audiences. At the end of the interview, an actor encouraged everyone to support the film Monster Hunt, which was set to be a sensation. Watching over this fragile piece, the shaman smiled at the ignorance of ordinary people. However, more troubling questions weighed on her mind. An attempt to study the school's surveillance footage yielded no results. But the sudden activity of two powerful entities at once, this couldn't be a coincidence. It suggested the return of an ancient demon to their world. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a different story was unfolding. A demoness under the human name Jessica was engaged in an animated conversation with her prey. Flattered by her attention, the man eagerly accepted her invitation to a date. In his hand rested a vial of sleeping pills, a part of his carefully crafted plan. But the choice of an unremarkable venue for the meeting puzzled him. However, all his thoughts and suspicions faded when he saw Jessica. Her dazzling beauty made him forget all caution. He showered her with compliments, oblivious to the predatory gleam in her eyes. Jessica, pulling her companion closer, confessed her hunger and desire to eat him. He simply laughed, taking her words as a joke, unaware of the grim truth behind them. Another man who had just arrived questioned Jessica's unusual choice of meeting place. Her only response was a predatory smile and an iron grip. She led him down a staircase where others were waiting. The sight before him was beyond belief. The room was filled with men. They had all fallen victim to the same trap. Jessica, without hiding her pleasure, introduced herself to each one. She seemed to revel in the wave of outrage that swept through the room. While her victims expressed their indignation at her game, she began to change. Her hair transformed into deadly tendrils, wrapping around the nearest people and strangling them. Eating them one by one was so exhausting, she thought as she watched her prey. Before their eyes, the men shriveled into hollow husks, losing their youth and vitality. The last man she had lured sobbed in terror, but Jessica mockingly reminded him of her warning about dinner. Their bodies didn't just wither away, they crumbled as if they had never existed. Lifting the hem of her dress, the demoness gazed in satisfaction at the pentagram on her stomach. This seal, meant to open the gates of hell, still required 200 more sacrifices out of the 666 needed. Meanwhile, a police investigation was underway at the school. Investigators, disguising the incident as a gas leak, were questioning students about the missing children. Most of them remembered nothing, complaining only of headaches. When it was Henry's turn, his empty responses raised the officer's suspicions. But the growling in the boy's stomach, mistaken for discomfort, helped him escape scrutiny. The dramatic moment came when Henry, leaving the interrogation, ran into Jason. His attempt to explain himself turned into a nightmare. Instead of his friend's face, Jason saw only the monstrous visage from that day, recoiling in horror. The officer, noticing the scene, recalled Henry's apparent discomfort and sent him back to the restroom. The subsequent interrogation of Jason became a true ordeal. Sweating profusely, the boy tried to hide the truth about that day. He didn't want to betray Henry. However, the mere mention of monsters made his hair stand on end, and the firm grip of the officer on his shoulder nearly brought him to tears. Salvation came in the form of Evelina. She decisively interrupted the questioning and took control of the situation. Pulling a small bundle from her pocket, she placed a talisman on Jason's forehead. Under the spell's influence, the truth he had tried to suppress burst forth. Everyone learned that Henry had indeed devoured a monster. Meanwhile, Henry, locked in the restroom, was grappling with his own turmoil. The fear that he had once again lost control in a school full of people gripped his heart. He didn't know how to handle the situation, how to protect others from what he had become. A sudden pounding on the restroom door only heightened his panic. When the doorknob gave way, an officer burst into the room. His main concern was whether the boy had finished emptying his stomach. The situation took an unexpected and frightening turn. Steve's voice echoed in Henry's mind, warning him about the true nature of the investigator. This was no human, it was a high-class monster, far surpassing his previous foes. The investigator quickly noticed the boy's strange behavior. He suspected that Henry was speaking to someone inside his stomach. Addressing Henry as Devourer, he extended his hands, radiating dark energy. Steve knew that the boy was not yet ready to face such power. So he resorted to the only possible means of escape, the use of the Devourer's special technique, the art of gas release. A burst of gas propelled Henry out the window, carrying him away from danger. Watching the spectacle, the investigator sneered with contempt. He considered the art of gas release to be vulgar and disgraceful. Henry, soaring through the air, was gripped by a terrible fear of heights. But his terror deepened when he realized his pursuer was still right behind him. Screaming like all the little humans, the investigator noted, drawing closer. Then, with a powerful blow, he sent the boy crashing into the mountainside. The resulting crater was so massive it resembled the impact of a missile. The monster's superiority was undeniable. Even the victory over the fourth-class teacher now seemed like child's play. Despite his fear, Henry continued to resist. His desperate strike only drew laughter from his opponent. But the boy seized an opportunity and managed to bite off half of the monster's arm. The investigator was impressed by this display of the Devourer's true nature. However, he decided to teach the boy a brutal lesson. He tossed Henry around like a rag doll, methodically beating him and grinding him into the dirt. Even in a half-conscious state, Henry found the strength for one last attack. He grabbed a stick from the ground and drove it into his opponent's body. This only amused the monster, who began shedding his human disguise. He pondered the possibility of devouring the Devourer's sphere and gaining the power of all the monsters Henry had consumed. The arrival of Evelina with a tape recorder changed everything. Her threat to remind the demon of his place forced him to retreat, though with clear displeasure. Keeping a firm grip on the device, Evelina gave orders to her warriors. They were to bind the unconscious Henry and deliver him to the organization. Henry's awakening was filled with confusion and pain. The shaman, who introduced herself as the Orthodox One, soothed him with a gentle voice. She apologized for the rough treatment by her subordinates, explaining that they were all good people. Seeing the boy's bewilderment, she explained their long-standing alliance in the fight against monsters. To confirm her words, she embraced him in a motherly manner. The moment of unity was interrupted by the loud growling of Henry's stomach. He hadn't eaten since the battle with the monster teacher. The shaman excused herself to fetch food and soon returned with several soldiers. They were leading a small girl in tears. Suddenly, the air was filled with a strange yet enticing aroma. The Orthodox One smiled as she explained that for now, they only had a fifth-class monster. However, she promised that next time, she would offer something more exquisite. She hoped for Henry's understanding, emphasizing that this was merely a humble token of gratitude for his help. But as Henry looked at the crying girl, he felt his insides clench with horror. He turned away, unable to comprehend. How could anyone harm a child? The shaman, noticing his turmoil, patiently explained a harsh truth. The creature before them merely wore the mask of a human child. Monsters had spent centuries perfecting the art of imitation, using human appearances and voices. But even after hearing this, Henry couldn't bring himself to harm someone pleading for mercy. Seeing his hesitation, the Orthodox One decided to give him a lesson. With a sharp motion, she untied the girl and pushed her toward the devourer. Instinctively, Henry rushed to catch the child. At the same time, he struggled with his own mouth, which seemed to have a will of its own. In the next instant, the mask of innocence fell. The child transformed into a pig monster. The monster immediately delivered a crushing blow to Henry. Overjoyed at its newfound freedom, the creature intended to deal with him first, then the others. The warriors watched the shaman anxiously, ready to intervene. But the Orthodox One remained unfazed. This was a test. In a moment of clarity, Henry stopped the monster's attack, gripping its paw tightly. He sincerely apologized for his hesitation, remembering the true purpose of the devourer. He was meant to save humans by devouring monsters. The Orthodox One noted with satisfaction the wisdom in Steve's choice of vessel. Henry, however, was filled with determination to save the child's body from the creature. And the only way to do that was to consume the monster entirely. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, a dark story was unfolding. A man who had offered help to an elderly woman hid black intentions behind his mask of virtue. A serial killer who relished in the suffering of his victims. That's why he was delighted by the solitude of the place where his unsuspecting victim had led him. He smirked, drawing a knife, repeating that the elderly should always receive assistance. But his arrogance evaporated when the helpless old woman pulled out an axe. Before he could even process what was happening, Jessica's hair tentacles wrapped around his neck. Slowly, they drained his life force. The demoness seemed displeased, scolding her grandmother assistant for the low quality of prey. The plan to open the gates of hell required special sacrifices, strong, talented people. The sudden arrival of an aide with a new victim only deepened her irritation. However, the situation took an unexpected turn. The young man brought before her, instead of fearing her, expressed genuine excitement upon seeing the demoness. Waving a book in his hands, he enthusiastically proved that everything written in it was real. This unexpected behavior caught Jessica's attention. Examining the book's contents, she saw an opportunity in this strange monster enthusiast. With its help, she could find her way to even more valuable sacrifices. Instead of killing the boy, she granted him his long-desired transformation into a monster. Meanwhile, Henry had emerged victorious over the pig monster. He struggled to process the brutality of the Orthodox shaman's actions. She reminded him of their alliance and the need to prepare for the battle against the demoness. But it seemed that Henry's trust in her had already been shaken. Henry's school life had also changed. The local bully tried to harass Henry as usual, but to his surprise, he found that he could no longer intimidate his former punching bag. Every movement Henry made radiated an unconscious menace. Even his apologies, spoken in a calm voice, filled the bully with inexplicable dread. Looking at Henry, strange visions surfaced in the bully's mind. It was as if he were flying toward a mysterious light, overwhelmed by a sense of boundless peace and happiness. But the most painful thing for Henry was Jason's behavior. His friend avoided all contact, rushing out of any room Henry entered. Jason, tormented by fear, couldn't even explain to himself the reason for his actions. But just the thought of speaking to Henry filled him with overwhelming terror. Suddenly, in the middle of the school hallway, Jason noticed something resembling a monster. Trying to ignore the vision, he gathered his things and hurried home after class. The thought of his own insanity swirled in his mind. Strange memories haunted him, and now he was starting to see monsters everywhere. Suddenly, his attention was drawn to the excited shouts of a crowd. People surrounded the school's overweight nerd, calling him unbelievably handsome. It was as if he had stepped right off the cover of a fashion magazine. The most beautiful girls in school eagerly vied for his attention. The boy simply winked seductively, clearly enjoying the attention. Just hours earlier, the demoness had planted a lustful monster inside his body. Now everyone within range found him irresistibly attractive. Using his newfound power, he invited the girls to follow him to his hellish paradise. Watching this, Jason felt something was terribly wrong. Rubbing his eyes, he saw the truth. Instead of a handsome boy, there stood a grotesque monster. Fear for the girls gripped his heart, but he doubted the police would believe his words. The nerd was already leading his entourage toward the demoness, eager to earn her praise. But suddenly their path was blocked by Jason's friends, the local school thugs. He had called everyone he knew, assembling the toughest crew in the neighborhood. Standing among them, Jason demanded that the girls be let go, though inside he was shaking with fear. The nerd shifted nervously, confused as to why these people were blocking his way. The bullies grinned slyly, ready to deal with their unexpected prey. However, deep down, they had hoped to face a more formidable opponent. Instead of a terrifying monster, all they saw was a regular nerd, whom they began to mock, pinching his cheeks. Jason was stunned. How could the creature that had seemed so dangerous now tremble in fear? The humiliation continued. The bullies ordered him to strip, reinforcing the demand with a slap. The girls, too, received threats. Reporting them to the police would land them in the same situation. Despair swelled inside the nerd. Even after becoming a desirable monster, he couldn't overcome his fear. The bullies, still seeing him as a handsome guy, began taking pictures of his disgrace. Unsatisfied with mere humiliation, they demanded he remove the last piece, his underwear. Jason tried to stop what was happening, believing the lesson had already been learned. But they only laughed, reminding him of his own, even crueler methods of bullying. They called him the real evil, saying his level of torment had far surpassed their own. Jason shuddered at these words. The loss of his memories had hidden his dark past from him. Suddenly, a voice echoed in the nerd's head, outraged by the monster's humiliation. From within his hair, a demonic face emerged. Its appearance sent a wave of terror through everyone present. The creature, having fully taken over the nerd's body, released a gas infused with pheromones. Under its influence, the bullies began confessing their love to one another. One particularly skinny boy gushed to his friend about how cute his belly was. Jason watched this madness in horror. He was already regretting not letting them continue their usual bullying. The monster, noticing Jason's immunity to the gas, became intrigued. It lunged at him, realizing it had found the perfect offering for the demoness. But suddenly Henry appeared from above, ready to protect his friend. The Devourer recalled his conversation with the shaman about the two paths of evolution. They consisted of devouring monsters and training techniques. The shaman had explained that a devourer could only consume monsters weaker than itself. To eat a strong opponent, one had to first defeat them in fair combat. To achieve this, it was necessary to train in the gas release technique, which compressed stomach energy. With proper training, the body could expel energy through all possible openings. Using gas release, Henry soared into the air after his opponent. However, his impatience betrayed him. His energy ran out at a critical moment in the attack. The monster's counterstrike sent Henry plummeting down, reminding him of the shaman's warning about caution. The opponent merely chuckled, though initially he had been frightened by the Devourer's presence. The chance to earn a reward from the demoness strengthened his resolve to use his special ability. That ability was the lustful arrow. This magic, commonly known as Cupid's arrow, made its victim fall madly in love with the archer. Sensing the danger, Henry mustered his last bit of strength and attempted to dodge the attack. He managed the maneuver, but was completely drained in the process. The opponent, still possessing 6 functional arms, did not waste his next opportunity. The arrow struck true, and Henry's body was engulfed in agonizing flames. Watching his suffering, the demon spoke of the nature of true love. It was always painful, like fire. Feeling as though his heart was being torn apart, Henry struggled to avoid eye contact with the monster. But the creature forced his eyes open, demanding to become his one true love. The Devourer fought desperately against the overwhelming emotions. The monster, ignoring his torment, demanded to know who was dearest to him. Henry's answer, a pet named Yama, the king of the dead, stunned the monster. In the next instant, the monster lost its limbs and collapsed to the ground. Henry's tall figure had become completely unrecognizable. Word of the event reached Evelina, who rushed to the shaman with urgent news. The old seer, however, was already immersed in reviewing drone footage. The Devourer hiding within the boy had finally revealed its monstrous nature. The shaman told Evelina about the unusual nature of this entity. Unlike normal monsters that consume their victims' souls, this Devourer had chosen a different path. It had hidden behind a human soul after being exiled from the heavens and devouring the king of Yama himself. Now, having broken free, the Devourer had made a fatal mistake. Mistaking the lust demon for a fragment of Yama, it greedily devoured its flesh. But soon all it felt was disappointment. The creature's rage grew as it realized that taste was far from what it desired, the soul of the underworld's ruler. The monster, sensing the Devourer's threat to the demoness, made a desperate decision. Gathering all its energy, it unleashed a barrage of arrows. But the Devourer simply opened its bottomless maw wider. Swallowing all the remaining arrows of lust, it turned its attention back to the monster. With each bite, the creature began to rapidly shrink. In a critical moment, the shaman summoned number 23. She granted him permission to use his full power to stop the Devourer. The demon could hardly believe the sudden mercy from the stern old woman. But she reminded him of the key condition: the Devourer must remain unharmed. The demon smirked, suspecting the shaman had a special attachment to the human boy. The old woman coldly reminded him of her priorities. The Devourer was more important than any common demon. Number 23 accepted the terms but promised that one day he would personally deal with the demoness. Evelina, stunned by what she had heard, struggled to comprehend how the monster had managed to consume the Judge of Hell. The shaman revealed the secret of the Devourer's origins. It was a malevolent spirit, a primitive entity driven only by insatiable hunger. They dwelled in the darkest depths of hell, feeding on other monsters and their excrement. These wretched beings were doomed to eternal suffering due to the nature of their bodies. The Creator had not given them the ability to expel what they consumed. He had turned their existence into an endless torment. They continued to eat everything in sight until their stomachs burst from being overfilled. However, among them, one unusual spirit emerged, one that suddenly developed a spark of consciousness. A strange thought formed in its mind, a desire to taste something more exquisite. Such thoughts were unheard of for malevolent spirits, whose only instinct was a mindless craving for food. The young spirit, though puzzled by its own thoughts, continued searching for answers. It passionately wished to find a way to reach better-tasting food. Then a sudden realization struck the spirit. To enjoy food, one must first stay alive. Its gaze turned toward a hole in the ceiling, the place where the remains and waste of monsters fell from above. After much contemplation, the spirit did the unthinkable. It created something within itself that the Creator had denied it, by piercing its own buttocks. Now it could consume endlessly and expel waste as needed. This led it to commit the unimaginable, devouring the king of Yama himself. Returning to the present events, the lust demon met its absurd end in the jaws of the Devourer. Number 23 arrived in the midst of the chaos, determined to rein in the rampaging Devourer. The demon began explaining that he had been granted full permission to use his power. But before he could finish his sentence, He lost half of his body to the Devourer's powerful bite. Reappearing, number 23 remarked that the battle with the Devourer had just gotten far more interesting. The demon had no objections to his opponent's gluttony. He demonstrated dozens of copies of himself floating in the air. He was amused that such an important being was nothing more than a primitive spirit from hell's depths. He wondered why the shaman considered the Devourer a key figure in the fight against the demoness. Confident in his strength, the demon continued fighting, despite losing each clone. In the end, he managed to land a serious blow, piercing the Devourer's chest. Proudly, he announced his lineage from the great Monkey King, Sun Wukong. Kevin was astonished by the Devourer's resilience after such a powerful attack. The demon worried about the shaman's wrath if he failed his mission, but suddenly his arm, which had pierced the Devourer's body, vanished into the creature's stomach. The monster had the ability to consume even the parts that impaled it. Kevin did not despair, realizing the battle had revealed crucial details about his opponent. The Devourer had only one maw, capable of consuming just one target at a time. The demon decided to exploit this weakness by creating numerous clones to overwhelm him. The plan seemed simple: generate more duplicates than the Devourer could eat. Soon, the monster was buried under an avalanche of Kevin's attacking clones. However, the triumph was short-lived. The Devourer's eyes glowed with an ominous light. Opening its maw wider, the beast began incinerating all the copies with a single gaze. Suddenly, the spell of lust started dissipating over the bewitched bully couples. Former lovers were horrified as they realized what had happened. Some cried while others started fighting. Jason regained consciousness in the midst of the chaos, unable to understand what was happening around him. In the last flashes of awareness, he remembered Henry's strange vision. Raising his gaze, he saw a dazzling light emanating from the Devourer. Kevin, bleeding out, realized the monster had used its abilities. However, it had done so through its mouth instead of the usual way. Its filthy and repulsive art had helped the Devourer defeat many opponents. The creature's skin began to slowly peel away, revealing Henry's essence. Kevin hoped for the completion of the opponent's transformation, marveling at its power. The demon realized that the Devourer might be seeking a way to restore its depleting strength. But the true Kevin, unlike his copies, possessed far greater power. He decided to change tactics and stopped feeding the monster with his duplicates. With each new attack, the Devourer's body gradually disappeared, giving way to Kevin's power. Kevin watched as the monster grew increasingly hungry and weak. The Devourer's attacks had noticeably lost their former strength. Looking at his opponent's body, the demon decided it only had enough strength for one final blow. Kevin launched an attack, provoking the monster into using the last remnants of its energy. Unexpectedly, the Devourer began devouring its own flesh instead of attacking its opponent. Kevin couldn't believe his eyes. The monster was replenishing its strength by eating its own limbs. This time, the Devourer's technique proved to be incredibly powerful. It sent Kevin flying a significant distance. The descendant of the Monkey King felt humiliated by what the lowly monster had done. He couldn't comprehend how it dared to take away half of his body. But at that moment, the Devourer returned to Henry's human form. Kevin then decided to ignore the shamaness's orders. Just then, a frightened Jason appeared. He was ready to protect his friend at the cost of his own life. He remembered how Henry had defended him just half an hour ago, as well as that incident at school where Henry had sacrificed his life, believing him to be a friend. Jason realized the one before him was not a monster, but his loyal friend. He ordered Kevin not to touch Henry, which only provoked the demon's laughter. Kevin found it amusing that a human could consider a monster his friend. The demon decided that these two lowly beings were destined to die together. To Kevin's surprise, his attack on Jason resulted only in his own injury, and Jason delivered a crushing blow that sent the demon flying. Kevin couldn't believe that an ordinary human possessed such incredible power. Jason himself stared at his transformed body in confusion. Suddenly, his eyes rolled back, which put Kevin, who was ready to attack, on alert. The demon realized that the person before him was not ordinary and attempted a new strike. But an unexpectedly strong hand and the voice of the shamaness stopped his attack. She reminded him of the order to keep Henry unharmed. Kevin recognized the old woman's voice, who marveled at the stubbornness of his copy. The devout realized that the clone still hadn't grasped its true nature. She began chanting ancient mantras, causing Kevin unbearable pain. The spell gradually drained the demon's strength until he was completely immobilized. Defeated, Kevin began begging for forgiveness, admitting his mistake. The shamaness mocked his ambition to oppose the demoness alone. She reminded him that he was merely a product of genetic engineering, bound to obey. The devout threatened that she could end his life at any moment. Lifting Henry and carrying him away, she promised to teach him how to control his power. Watching this scene, the demoness and her followers observed. She understood that a battle was unnecessary now. They would meet again regardless. After all, Henry had already received a special invitation from the demoness. Later, lying on a bed at headquarters, the boy sank into a strange dream. He saw a meeting between the Devourer and Yama, who was amazed by the lower creature's abilities. The king was astonished that a being from the depths of hell had risen to such heights. Yama wondered whether the Devourer would ultimately be left completely alone in the world. The ruler of hell marveled at how the creator could have made such a lonely being. Upon waking, Henry couldn't understand where he was or what had happened. Evelina, who was nearby, quickly reported the boy's awakening to the devout. She explained to Henry that the demon of lust had been banished and that they were in the Exorcist group's building. Evelina herself was astonished by Henry's incredible regeneration. His arms had fully healed in just 4 hours of sleep. Henry asked Evelina if she had seen a boy in a school uniform named Jason. At that moment, Jason himself entered the room, worried about his friend's condition. A frightened Henry tried to make sure his friend had not been hurt in the battle with the demon. Jason, with tears in his eyes, recalled how poorly he had treated Henry in the past. He was grateful that, despite everything, Henry had continued to protect him. Henry asked his friend not to worry, reminding him how he had defended him from other bullies. With a smile, he explained that protecting each other was a natural expression of friendship. Jason hesitantly asked if they could be friends again. Henry, with tears in his eyes, replied that they had never stopped being friends. Evelina was outraged that someone would want to befriend a monster. She recalled her conversation with the shamaness about her mission to protect Henry. The girl couldn't understand why they couldn't just keep the Devourer locked up. The shamaness explained, "The Devourer only digests what doesn't invoke his hatred. If he were to develop hatred toward humans, he could become dangerous even to monsters." Evelina noticed that the Devourer didn't seem particularly eager to consume even monsters. This reminded the shamaness of times she would rather forget. She reminded Evelina that her mission was to protect humanity, not monsters. She swore to follow Henry everywhere, carrying out the devout's orders. Suddenly, Henry's stomach let out a loud growl. The boy urgently needed the restroom. Evelina, with disgust, admitted she had no desire to deal with him. After finishing in the restroom, Henry discovered the person he had recently digested beneath him. Evelina entered the restroom to see what was happening. She was surprised to note that people really did come out through the anal opening. Henry tried to drive the girl away, but she explained that she was obligated to watch over him. As soon as the fat man regained consciousness, Evelina began beating him furiously. She despised the man who had willingly abandoned his humanity for the power of a monster. The girl explained that the devout would judge him for his betrayal. The punishment would undoubtedly be execution. But first, he needed to be interrogated. Evelina placed a magical talisman on his forehead. She explained to Henry that it was necessary to obtain truthful testimony. Before the assembled group, the man spoke of a demoness with dark hair and numbers on her stomach. The gathering was held at the World Exorcist Union, formed after the crisis 300 years ago. The devout decided to consult her allies about this situation. Marcus expressed suspicion regarding the prisoner's awareness. The nun assumed that the demoness might have intentionally sent him as a distraction. Jim insisted on immediate action before the demoness could open the gates of hell. Jamal agreed on the danger, but suggested waiting for the devourer to grow stronger. One of those present defended the superiority of science over the power of monsters. Noah tried to calm the man, reminding him that they all had special abilities. But Yvonne got angry, doubting the scientist's combat experience against monsters. Neville explained that many modern technologies emerged from the study of monsters. To demonstrate his inventions, he detached his mechanical arm. He turned it into a projectile, making it hover in the air. Robert showcased his miniature neural gun to those present. He explained that the device combined rocket technology with artificial intelligence. The scientists believed that the future belonged to technology, not outdated methods of fighting monsters. Ivan was annoyed, knowing Robert only as a car manufacturer and creator of useless gadgets. But the mechanical arm unexpectedly struck Ivan, demonstrating the touch of the future. Noah tried to de-escalate the situation, but his touch teleported Robert to another world. The scientist found himself at the North Pole, realizing the true nature of Noah's ability. Robert became interested in using teleportation for a Mars colonization project. Noah explained the limitation of his power. He could only teleport to familiar places. Ivan, furious from the punch, demanded Robert's immediate return over the radio. However, the scientists discovered strange fungi growing on his body, a manifestation of Yvonne's ability. Noah explained that Avon's blood contained fungal spores. He mentioned it because it was just one part of their abilities as exorcists. Robert admitted that he had provoked them on purpose to test their powers. Noah had also noticed this and was glad Robert's curiosity had been satisfied. So, he suggested Robert visit a good ramen cafe while Yvonne calmed down. Meanwhile, at school, Jason realized that a year under the monster's control had ruined his grades. Henry smiled, reminding him that he hadn't been a stellar student even before. But Jason wasn't too worried, remembering his dream of becoming a professional gamer. Henry suggested they go to a gaming cafe after class. Life at school returned to normal, and no one remembered the events with the monsters. Suddenly, a bully approached, trying to pull Jason away from the loser, Henry. Jason got angry, demanding respect for his friend, while they dragged Henry to a store. However, Henry smiled and set the price of 200,000 won for the favor of buying buns. He explained that 200,000 won was a perfectly reasonable price for his services. The bully was furious at such audacity, but he still handed over the money both by card and in cash, out of an indescribable fear of him. His friend also asked Henry to buy a bun, though everyone knew how absurd the price was. Taking the money, Henry calmly clarified their orders. Suddenly, one of the school bullies started acting strangely around Henry. An inexplicable attraction pulled her toward the boy's backside. Overwhelmed by her feelings and behavior, she soon ran away in tears. The guys just laughed, deciding she must have been under the influence of something. Hiding, the girl couldn't understand the reason for her strange attraction to the outcast. Meanwhile, Noah and Robert returned to the Exorcists after visiting Japan. Ivan was still angry but softened when he received a treat as an apology. Robert admitted that he had deliberately provoked them to test their abilities. Marcus interrupted the conversation, urging them to discuss a plan against the demoness. Jim insisted on immediate action before the demoness could regain her strength. Saint Isabella supported this opinion, doubting the potential of the Devourer's new vessel. The Righteous One recalled events from 300 years ago when Exorcists first fought the demoness. With each soul she consumed, the demoness grew stronger, nearing the number 666. She provoked a large-scale punitive operation to harvest more souls. The Righteous One was supposed to be her final victim. However, she tried to take her own life to prevent the demoness from absorbing her power. At the critical moment, a mysterious young man appeared, interrupting the energy transfer. He apologized to the Righteous One for his late arrival, which had caused many deaths. This man, having used all of the Devourer's power, became the most powerful vessel. The Devourer explained to the girl that he wouldn't be able to protect her in the battle against the monsters. She protested, wanting to fight alongside the Devourer against their common enemy. Ignoring her objections, he devoured the girl, believing his stomach to be the safest place. Watching the scene unfold, the demoness finally understood the nature of the Devourer. She was astonished as to why a monster exiled from hell had chosen to protect humanity. She noticed that the monster had retained a human soul, contrary to expectations. The man spoke of a contract, the preservation of his soul in exchange for the constant consumption of monsters. While inside his stomach, the Righteous One saw memories of the man's past. He had been a county governor during a terrible famine in Joseon. People were dying of starvation and from sudden tiger attacks in the region. His wife tried to support him, reminding him of his responsibility to the people. But he felt powerless, realizing that not even a royal title would save his people. However, the mysterious stranger appeared out of nowhere. Holding out a strange egg, he spoke of destiny. The man handed over the egg and disappeared as suddenly as he had appeared. 8:04. He left the head of the race and his wife with an unusual gift. The head, however, decided to feed the egg to his weakened wife in spite of his words about fate. The wife was worried about her husband's decision to cook the mysterious egg, but he decided it was foolish to treat the egg as a sacred relic in times of famine. He asked his wife to move closer so that he could smash his face against her forehead. His proximity embarrassed the woman, for her husband had long kept his distance from her. Suddenly, the egg was hard as a stone, causing the wife great pain. She decided to demonstrate this to her husband by hitting him on the head with the egg. He recognized that his wife was right. The egg was as hard as the corner of a table. The couple laughed, deciding that their destiny was not to eat the egg, but to find a reason to be happy. The wife believed that the famine would one day end and people would be happy again. On one day, people from the king's court arrived in the county with food. The messenger asked to gather all the inhabitants to distribute rice. The chief joyfully summoned the people, remembering his wife's prediction of the smiles to come. The hunger-weary inhabitants gathered, longing to feed their children. The messenger insisted on the presence of all the inhabitants before the distribution began. When the head announced the arrival of all, the messenger smiled. The human form of the messenger was replaced by that of a monstrous crocodile. He turned out to be a monster of the fourth class, a dragon general. His assistant, the monster leader, used tentacles to absorb souls. The third monster, called Beta, also revealed his true nature. The head begged his wife to flee after realizing that the people in front of them were not human. But the dragon monster struck him, paralyzing his body in front of his beloved. In desperation, the head begged for help, willing to do anything to save his wife. At that moment, a mysterious voice sounded from the egg, offering a bargain. The creature offered to give up his body in exchange for the power to win. The mysterious inhabitant of the egg turned out to be a monster eater who had been banished from his world. The reason for his banishment was the unthinkable. He dared to eat the king of the pit himself. The creature entered his body through his mouth, choosing it as a temporary refuge. The monster explained that it would remain inside until its powers were fully restored. Monster Beat interrupted their conversation by noticing another living person. He suggested that the brothers eat the victim on their own. By doing this, he aroused their displeasure by his insatiability. Suddenly, the man felt the strength of the devourer. He broke the monster's arm and rushed to his wife. In rage, he ordered the dragon monster to take its claws away from his beloved. The astonished transformer monster felled Steve. He did not believe that such power could be possessed by a mere man. The monster Beta attacked the man, turning his weapon into a giant hammer. This was his unique ability to change the size of the bat. However, the head destroyed the bat, after which he also tore off half of the monster's body. His lightning-fast movements left only the shocked dragon monster alive. The dragon, eager to avenge his brothers, unleashed its fiery breath on the enemy. But the head defended himself with the stolen ability of the monster Beta, shocking the enemy. Using his defeated brother's powers, he chopped the dragon monster's body into pieces. The dying dragon recognized him as the legendary Devourer. The head, however, rushed to his wife, who was staring in a daze at what had happened. The realization of the doom of all filled his eyes with horror. The man blamed himself for failing to protect the people of the county from the monstrous destruction. The only consolation in this tragedy was that his wife had survived. Realizing his failure, he considered himself unworthy of the position of county head. However, Perry heard the inner voice of the devourer. He ordered the head to immediately eat the monster standing before him. His mouth acted on its own, trying to swallow the woman. Terrified, the husband tried to convince the devourer that it was his wife and not the monster before him. The devourer insisted, catching the odor of the monster emanating from the woman. Suddenly, the wife soared above the earth. She resented the decreasing number of people in the villages due to famine. She confessed that she had come to the village with her brothers to satisfy her hunger. Her body transformed, revealing the true form of a butterfly monster. She expressed disgust at creatures like her husband devouring other monsters. The butterfly monster used her Big Bang ability in an attempt to destroy him. He survived the attack, beginning to realize all the weirdness he had previously ignored. He remembered the mysterious corpses mangled by invisible tigers. Her beauty among the starved people now took on a sinister meaning. Enraged by Steve's tenacity, the butterfly monster decided to use its ultimate power. She activated her explosive wings ability, turning them into deadly orbs. The man hesitated, still unwilling to kill the creature that was his wife. But the eater's voice demanded the monster be destroyed, and Steve rushed to the attack. The butterfly monster responded with a crushing blow from the blast ball. The butterfly monster was horrified to realize the eater's unique ability. It could absorb any attack. The absorbed magic became his power. The defeated and wounded butterfly monster took the form of his wife. She tried to deceive her husband with feigned innocence, but still tried to attack. However, he grabbed her hand, immersing himself in the memories of their marriage. He remembered her embarrassment when they walked holding hands and she held wildflowers. A year of their marriage had passed, and he regretted that he could give only modest wildflower bouquets. His wife asked him not to think of treasures, dreaming of receiving flowers even in deep old age. Now, dropping tears, he demanded an answer. When the monster took possession of that body, she mockingly went over the moments of their lives, but suddenly admitted that she had taken over this body over 50 years ago. After talking him down, she decided to kill the head with a melee attack. Suddenly, Steve's body transformed. He took on the form of a devourer, devouring the butterfly monster. The eater explained that he was sharing a body with him, but he would take control if he started doing something stupid, and threatened that he would eat his soul if the latter tried to starve him. Looking at the monster's disappearing body, he swore to the eater to satisfy his hunger. He promised to destroy all the monsters of the world, leaving none alive. The scene was watched by a frightened girl, but a bright light blinded her. When she woke up, she saw a calm man. He explained that the demoness had been destroyed. The girl looked anxiously at his face, but the eater assured him that his body would recover and there was no cause for alarm. The girl, weeping, touched his breast, worried not for his body but for Steve's soul. The truth-teller remembered how 300 years ago, many exorcists had fallen in battle with monsters. Without their sacrifice, the world would have long ago become a hell filled with monsters. She asked the other exorcists to give the group time. During that time, they will strengthen Mr. Henry. Meanwhile, the cunning granny lured two stout men to help her with the bags. She rejoiced in catching the strong victims, confident of the demoness's praise. The demoness, however, frowned, realizing that the captured men were not at all what they appeared to be. One of the men, elegantly adjusting his tuxedo, introduced himself. He was Dracula, a monster of the first class. He had heard of the demoness' plans to open the gates of hell and had come to dissuade her. Dracula explained that upper-class monsters value order and do not crave chaos. The demoness laughed, calling the classification of monsters a pathetic fiction of humans. She understood Dracula's fear of the appearance of creatures superior to his strength. Dracula's assistant, taking the form of a werewolf, attacked the defiant demoness. The demoness's subjugation monster entered the battle for defense, but he was clearly inferior to the stronger opponent. Dracula reminded that he had first and second-class monsters on his side. The demoness looked at the loser with disdain. She was disgusted that the monster clung to human categorization. She challenged him to a fight, rejecting a peaceful solution to the conflict. Dracula, losing his human form, revealed the true form of a monster of the first class. Now only battle could decide who was worthy to determine the fate of this world. Henry suddenly found himself in his stomach, even though he had been at school a second ago. He heard strange noises all around him. Soon found the tiny figure of Steve's grandfather. The decrease in size was a sign that digestion had begun, but the old man was in a hurry to share more important events. Grandpa knew about the meeting with the righteous woman and asked her to help her in the coming battle. He called her wretched, doomed to endless life without the right to die. However, the old man also asked Henry to escape after banishing the demoness. By this, he greatly puzzled the boy. However, suddenly Henry woke up again in the school. He immediately caught sight of an embarrassed Kylie in front of him. Henry thought she wanted to go to the store and asked for money, but she turned out to be here to ask him out after school. Kylie wanted to test her feelings for her boyfriend because her heart was racing at the sight of loser Henry. Henry's question about her intentions caused Kylie's heart to flutter again. Confused by her feelings, she threatened to beat him up if he didn't stay after school. Evelina abruptly interrupted their conversation by announcing serious business with Henry. Kylie was surprised by the appearance of an unfamiliar student and her persistence. But Henry himself asked Kylie to reschedule. It seemed crazy to the girl, but still embarrassed, Kylie suddenly agreed. 9:47. Still awkwardly, she asked to free up time tomorrow. In the evening, Evelina informed Henry of the order to defeat the demoness in a month, and explained that the demoness continued to consume people to open the gates of hell. Henry was to eat monsters for a month, starting in 4th grade. But Henry had not heard about the classification of monsters. Evelina was surprised at Henry's ignorance, but told him, the higher the class, the more dangerous it was. Evelina explained that monsters are divided into 7 classes and 3 main groups. The weakest, from 5th to 7th, have physical strength and the simplest magic. They are called grabbers due to their lack of unique abilities. Also, the middle classes, 3rd and 4th. They possess unique abilities that determine their strength. The strongest, 1st and 2nd class. They often bear famous names from legends and tales. Dracula, mummies, werewolves, and zombies feed on people's fear. They absorb human fear through novels, comic books, and movies. These monsters grow stronger effortlessly, absorbing fear from all over the world. At the same time, Dracula mockingly observed the demoness. 964. He considered her mind damaged by being in the stomach of an eater. He wondered how a huge monster could overpower a skittish bat. Dracula summoned 1,000 clone bats. They greedily devoured everything in their path. This was his unique ability, creating mice that ate everything. The hair monster quickly fell under their assault. Dracula realized the loss of the devil's status as one of hell's strongest creatures. And he had fed on people's fears for hundreds of years and became the strongest. At this time, Evelina told of exorcists fighting ancient monsters. They worked to destroy the frightening image. They used the media and mass culture to do so. But centuries of fear in human minds made 1st and 2nd class monsters invulnerable. Henry became curious about the class of his enemy. The demoness was officially considered a Class 1 monster. But this estimate was inaccurate due to lack of information. Only the first eater had seen all her unique abilities and knew the power. Dracula, on the other hand, did not believe at this time that the demoness possessed such flawed abilities. He believed she had already shown her true abilities, but she admitted that the hair monster was only an imitation. She did not show her real abilities, though Dracula was sure it was a bluff. With a sly smile, the demoness pointed to something behind her opponent's back. Turning around, Dracula froze in amazement. Henry asked Evelina the reason for the monster's appearance in the human world. Like the eater, the monsters sought an easy path to power through eating other creatures. History led them to King Pitt and the priest Henry Brenger, who once ruined 312 women. A priest who became rich on indulgences died at 56 of syphilis. In hell, he begged God for salvation, desperately clutching the cross in his trembling hands. King Yama explained that God himself had sent him to hell for his heinous crimes. He condemned the priest to the Pacadalia, a place of purification for sinful souls before rebirth. However, Henry's soul was too vicious for purification. 995. The priest's soul was destined to be eaten by monsters. When the monsters emerged from the walls, the priest began to pray for forgiveness again. A sudden, imperious command stopped the monsters. 998, the priest exclaimed, believing in divine intervention. A powerful monster grabbed the priest by the head. He rebuked the lower creatures for encroaching on his prey. Small monsters pitifully made excuses for hunger. Then the higher monster recalled the law of the jungle in hell. Evelina said that according to the interrogations, only the strongest monsters eat people in hell. Weak monsters, deprived of food in hell, look for gaps in the walls to get into the human world. The human world became the only place where weak monsters could raise their status. Dracula stared in horror at the demoness who had created an exact replica of his body. She explained that her hair was threads of summoning and controlling monsters from hell. The demoness could instill hell monsters into people through her hair, but it was easier to feed the hair to the monster itself, turning it into an obedient slave. Dracula vehemently insisted on his authenticity. The demoness reminded him of his current bat form. Dracula's true body was created from 999 bats. The real Dracula then grabbed a small copy. The doppelganger absorbed the bat through his hand, restoring the integrity of his being. The werewolf monster watched the ability in horror. He had never heard how it was possible to turn higher monsters into slaves. Then he remembered the law abolishing sorcery. The werewolf knew killing the caster would destroy all his spells. He attacked the demoness with his unique piercing claws ability. The monster grandmother protected the demoness with her power. It used its grandmother knitting ability to create a shield. The werewolf's claws penetrated the defense, and it was determined to do so. But the monster grandson covered the demoness with his body. The werewolf didn't immediately realize that the grandmother's threads had weakened the power of his attack. The monster grandson grabbed the werewolf, activating the Korean national wrestling ability. They ended up in a special sacrifice arena, where the body of the loser becomes a ritual sacrifice. The enraged werewolf attacked the monster first, but his blows had no effect before the official duel began. The third-rank monster's ability to create a separate space stunned the werewolf. The monster grandson explained that living too long among humans had made him forget about this place. His ability created a special battlefield and determined the rules of the fight. The werewolf realized in horror that they were in hell. It was a place where only the law of the jungle ruled. Here in their ancient homeland, the winner took all, and weakness was considered a sin. It was a realm of eternal struggle, where even the highest monsters could fall before the ancient laws. The monster wrestler announced the rules. Touching the ground or stepping outside the arena meant defeat. He offered his head as a wager. The werewolf, interested in the opponent, accepted the condition. The werewolf attacked, confident of victory over the third-ranked monster. However, his attempts to move his opponent proved futile in this special space. The monster fighter explained that the energy stored in the human world was useless here. The enraged werewolf continued to attack, but could not shake the unperturbed opponent. The monster fighter asked when the werewolf had last fought at the risk of his life. The werewolf realized that for centuries he had only absorbed the energy of fear, forgetting the taste of real combat. After receiving his second rank, he lost the need to fight. He had always been content with human fear. As people become intoxicated with money and power, he became intoxicated with an endless flow of energy. The monster fighter, realizing his opponent's realization, noticed that it was too late to make up for idleness. With one powerful throw, he defeated the werewolf. The referee began enforcing the terms of the fight. The winner, following the ancient laws, took the energy of the loser along with his head. Returning to the human world, the monster fighter saw the disappearing body of the monster grandmother. He learned that monsters are reborn unless consumed permanently by the Devourer. The hope of meeting his grandmother after the gates of hell opened was in vain. Reborn monsters lose all memories, becoming completely different creatures. A strange pain squeezed the monster wrestler's chest, and a lone tear flowed from his eye. The demoness explained that it was a side effect of using the human body. She began to remember her own past. Drowning in the river, she accepted the offer of the mysterious light. The demoness set a condition. The creature must show people the price of their cruelty to her. In a modern park, a girl fell asleep on a bench. Then she was noticed by a concerned man. He asked her if she had run away from home, mentioning a daughter her age. The man offered to buy food and help her find lodging for the night, preparing to leave after her silence. A sudden pain in her stomach caused the girl to confess that she had not eaten for days. The man smiled predatorily, looking over her body and promising food and lodging for the night. The appearance of Henry and Evelina interrupted his intentions, causing a startled reaction. Evelina introduced Henry and exposed the monster as a turtle general. He and the rabbit general had lured and devoured countless people in the past. Henry recognized the motifs of a familiar tale created by exorcists to disguise the real threat. The story turned out to be not a fairy tale, but a war between two monsters over hunting territory. Evelina demanded that the turtle general move away from the girl. It suddenly became clear that the monster was the girl herself, not the man. The turtle general of the third physical class happily recognized the exorcists. Evelina warned Henry of the monster's incredible foot speed. The monster resented the comparison, believing its speed to be incomparably faster than human speed. Henry punched through the turtle's shell with lightning speed, startling the monster with his speed. He recalled the month left before the battle with the demoness and asked about stronger monsters. The dying monster was surprised to recognize the legendary eater in his opponent. The turtle confessed that he had long dreamed of meeting the eater to absorb his power. Activating the ability, the monster created many ghostly limbs to attack. Henry ripped off the turtle's real arm in an instant, revealing the uselessness of its blows. The boy remembered an important conversation with Evelina about developing the transformation ability. His unique skill allowed him to release energy through any opening in his body. Following Evelina's instructions, Henry allowed energy to flow through blood vessels and pores. Evelina rejoiced at the boy's quick learning of the new stage of the eater's power. To demonstrate the skill's capabilities, Evelina shot different parts of Henry's body. She explained that pain was not fatal to the monster, but was necessary to master the power. There was little time to learn, and the fate of humanity depended on this skill. The turtle, having lost its limbs, applied the ghost turtle ability. The huge ghostly leg tried to crush the guy, but even this attack was useless in front of him. The monster continued to sacrifice its limbs, creating new ghostly attacks. The turtle was horrified to realize Henry's true identity as an invincible monster. The boy remembered the grueling training sessions under gun and pistol fire. In 3 days, he had mastered the bodily release of gases. He longed for even greater challenges. Evelina noticed a growing belligerence in him, possibly caused by the power of the eater. With a single movement of his hand, Henry turned the turtle into a pulp, revealing monstrous power. True Blood proudly noted that he had surpassed a monster of the third rank. Looking at his strength, she questioned the propriety of creating a powerful creature. In her room, the true believer looked at a ring that held 300 years of history. An unexpected visit from Sister Elizabeth interrupted her reflections on the past. The guest marveled at the incredible progress of the eater's training. Isabella revealed the secret of a cellar with a barrier designed to imprison people. She recalled the story of the traitor exorcist punished for helping monsters. Isabella questioned the true purpose of training an eater to fight a demoness. True Blood noted the hostility of her interlocutor, also recalling her dangerous position inside the barrier. Isabella felt a wave of incredible energy fill the entire room with its power. Despite her first rank as an exorcist, she realized the inhuman nature of this power. Deciding to act first, she drew her revolver to fire a bullet of love and favor. Righteousness was lightning behind Isabella's back, ready to strike. With an understanding smile, she recognized the justice of the nun's suspicions of her treachery. History was carried back 300 years. The industrious woodcutter was in a forest thicket. A talking deer offered the generous woodcutter an introduction to a beautiful fairy bride. A wily monster told of a fairy bathing in a mountain pond on a full moon. A deer taught the woodcutter how to steal the fairy's clothes and make her grant any wish. A monster coveted a child from the union of a man and a fairy for his sustenance. Suddenly, the righteous woman recognized the deer as a monster devouring half-blood children. The monster boastfully admitted to eating a dozen hybrids with special energy. Its unique ability manifested in a ghostly horn attack on an exorcist. The true believer repelled the attack with a talisman that transformed into a combat gauntlet for a counterstrike. The enchanted woodcutter attacked the exorcist, thus giving the monster time to maneuver. Distracted by the man's defense, the truther was vulnerable to attack. The devourer suddenly appeared in front of the trueborn. With one hand, he stopped the monster's deadly horn. The girl indignantly insisted on her ability to win without help. The eater excused herself, that from the outside her position looked rather dangerous. The enraged stag monster could not tolerate such disregard for his presence. With a single gesture, the eater sealed the creature's mouth, after consuming it whole from a distance. The man was perplexed why the girl didn't want a quiet life, entrusting the fight to him. She worried about the return of the demoness in the absence of the eater nearby. Surprised to realize the human nature of the eater, she stopped fearfully. He reassured her by explaining his immortal nature and his mission as the protector of humanity. The exorcist teacher noticed a dangerous closeness between the right-hand woman and the eater. The elder revealed the truth. There was still undigested demoness left in the eater's stomach. He warned of the danger of a creature capable of surpassing the threat of the demoness herself. The master recalled the exorcist's primary mission, the destruction of any threat to humanity. The devotee begged to find another way, realizing the impossibility of defeating by force. The elder said he had created a special bait monster. It can destroy even a powerful eater. The teacher revealed the nature of the created creature, a hybrid of human bodies, saying that it is immune to the digestion of the eater. The monster's body hid infernal flowers, capable of blooming only in an environment like the underworld. The eater's stomach filled with monster souls, the perfect soil for plants. The flowers were meant to drain the creature's strength, robbing it of its unique abilities. True Blood defended the eater, reminding him of his never-ending struggle for humanity. The master foresaw the creature's disillusionment with humanity and its future hatred. At a holiday fair, the eater was surprised by the invitation of a righteous woman to a meeting. The girl agonized over the betrayal as they shared a simple meal. Memories of her teacher's words tormented her, making her doubt the safety of the plan. Mentor had insisted that it was the true believer who was involved. Knowing the eater's shrewdness, he reminded his apprentice of the higher purpose of protecting humanity at all costs. The devourer, not feeling the taste of earthly food, rejoiced at the simple presence of the girl. At the last moment, he handed her the ring, unaware of the impending betrayal. The faithful woman accepted the gift with a heavy heart, realizing the inevitability of her mission. The devourer explained that the ring was a token of gratitude to the one who called him by name. With tears in her eyes, the faithful tried to return the gift, feeling the weight of betrayal. The sudden cries of the crowd announced the appearance of the monster, with whom the guards were fighting unsuccessfully at that time. The true believer tried to stop the devourer after realizing the lie about the monster's safety. The creature remembered its master's instructions about its true purpose. He needed to infect the devourer with poisonous flowers. The devourer instantly recognized the strange nature of the enemy. She looked neither like a human nor like a monster. In a desperate voice, the faithful warned her friend about the danger of being swallowed by the monster. Poisonous vines instantly pierced the girl's body. She tried to tell the truth about the teacher's plan. The devourer instantly and mercilessly destroyed the enemy. And then he rushed to the dying believer. Analyzing the girl's severe wounds, he decided to take a desperate step to save her. As with the possessed people, he planned to cleanse and heal her within himself. The chief exorcist was triumphant. His plan had worked. The devourer swallowed the girl with the hellish flowers. Now he could personally destroy the creature that had become too dangerous for humanity. The betrayal was carried out under the guise of salvation, condemning the devourer to a battle from within. The devourer concentrated and plunged into meditation, trying to heal the faithful inside his body. The girl watched in amazement as her wounds healed. This is all thanks to the amazing ability of the devourer. Suddenly, hellish flowers sprouted from her body. They brought excruciating pain to her savior. The puppet monster recalled the teacher's plan. It was the true believer who had to become the bearer of the deadly seeds. The chief exorcist watched the devourer suffer. He considered its elimination a necessary evil. The devourer, deprived of strength, refused to give up, trying to find a way to save her betrayed friend. The exorcist summoned an army of ghostly girls to attack the weakened enemy. Blue Dragon of Exorcism swallowed the guy. while at this time the faithful woman desperately struggled with the sprouting flowers. The demoness watched with bitterness the betrayal of the people who had killed their protector. She marveled at the uneaten faithful, whose hair proved to be an unbreakable contract. The demoness explained that the contract protected the faithful from being digested in the stomach. She watched the effect of the flowers, draining the strength of the one who protected humanity. The chief exorcist summoned the devourer from a deep crater, where he hid in a disfigured form. Even deprived of its powers, the devourer attacked the exorcist, turning into an ordinary monster. Exorcist begins ritual of sacrifice to Blue Dragon, covering the devourer's body with talismans. The faithful asked the demoness for help in getting rid of the deadly flowers. The demoness explained the limitations within the body, the inability to harm a person. In a final act of compassion, the demoness pushed the girl out through her esophagus, not forgetting to convey a bitter message. The exorcist was disappointed with the salvation of the faithful, seeing in this the collapse of his plan. The devourer, having absorbed part of the exorcist, gained new strength for the final battle. The exorcist gleefully noted the devourer's ability to digest people, seeing in this his true monstrous nature. By consuming human flesh, the devourer gained the power to resist amulets. Intoxicated with his new power, he continued to attack the exorcist. He found human flesh tastier than monsters. The faithful woman desperately tried to stop her friend with amulets. She begged him not to give in to the lust for human flesh. She showed the ring he had given her, reminding him of his humanity through tears of remorse. The devourer, awakening from his madness, realized his ability to digest people. He begged the faithful to flee, realizing that he had become a threat to all of humanity. A mysterious stranger suddenly appeared. He revealed the way to salvation through the destruction of the devourer's sphere. The man recognized him as the one who had once given him the egg of his power. The stranger explained that losing the sphere would return the devourer to its original essence. A mysterious energy wall prevented the devourer from approaching the man. The stranger hinted at the predetermination of the devourer's fate, promising revelations. The devourer noticed that the mysterious stranger had disappeared into a cloud of gas equipment. The faithful told Isabella a story, how the first devourer destroyed his sphere of power. Deprived of his power, he hid from people and monsters who were eager to destroy the creature. For helping the devourer, the true believer was imprisoned in a barrier for eternity, being recognized as a traitor. She was tormented by the thought that by not following the teacher's order, she had allowed the disasters to continue. Number 23, having overheard the story, understood the reason for the old exorcist's protection of the devourer. Kylie, who hadn't seen Henry for several days, thought about him, annoying her friends. Returning home alone, she met a frighteningly tall woman with strange behavior. The creature, admiring the girl's beauty, removed its mask, revealing the monstrous mouth of a monster before her. Paralyzed with fear, Kylie begged for salvation, unable to move. Henry suddenly appeared with a walkie-talkie in his hands, engaging in a fight with the monster. Evelina screamed indignantly over the radio, dissatisfied with his unauthorized actions. Kylie was amazed to recognize her savior as her missing classmate. Henry improvised an explanation for the appearance, making up a story about a prank for YouTube. Surprisingly, gullible Kylie believed this primitive lie, even praising the acting of his friend. The monster, enraged by the humiliation, attacked Henry, forcing him to protect the girl from deadly blows. Woman with a torn mouth, monster of the third physical class. She used the stationary knife ability. Henry warned Kylie of the danger, asking her to stay away from the fight with the creature. The monster rejoiced at the cut, unaware that he had already figured out the mechanics of her ability. Henry instantly bit off half of the creature's body, explaining that destroying the source would lift the curse. Kylie demanded the truth from her savior, suspecting his inhuman nature. Henry confessed his role as the devourer, the defender of humanity against the demoness. Kylie realized that her attraction to Henry was due to the suspension bridge effect. Evelina called Henry impatiently on the radio, worried about his unauthorized operation. The devourer calmly reported the successful elimination of another monster. Evelina scolded Henry for failing to report the monster's appearance in the city in a timely manner. Kylie, apologizing for her suspicions, thanked Henry for saving her life for the second time. Despite the effect of the suspension bridge, her heart continued to beat faster. Number 23 was immersed in memories of his origins through genetic engineering. The woman said that he was created from a fallen flat monster that had not received power. She asked the subject to become a heroic defender of humanity, despite its artificial origin. The radio reported the appearance of a sinister monster energy in the area of S32. The true believer insisted on sending the Devourer to develop his abilities. Enraged by this decision, number 23 demanded that the task be transferred to him. All members of the group gathered in the bandits' lair for the first time. They had a premonition of the events to come. Gang leader reveals horrifying truth. With the opening of the gates, uncontrollable monsters will flood into the human world. Suddenly, the leader transformed into a demonic entity, attacking his subordinates. He demanded their power to turn lives into a source of power against the monsters. The frightened bandits could not believe the betrayal of the leader, who was eager to absorb them. Number 23 arrived at the scene of a bloody massacre where the monster had thrown his cruel party. The monster admitted to devouring people not for food, but to gain strength. Kevin realized that this creature was unusual, something beyond the ordinary monster. The boy's memory of Provov's praise for mastering the technique surfaced. The gang leader reflected on the divine plan to separate the worlds of people and monsters. Like a tiger and a rabbit, the two worlds must understand each other and maintain balance. The monster revealed his plan to devour 1,000 people to defeat Devanica. He promised to return to the role of a regular predator after completing his mission. Number 23 reminded me of the first rule. All monsters are subject to immediate expulsion. Frustrated by Kevin's lack of understanding, the monster assumed its true first-class form. Kevin, although shocked by the enemy's transformation, continued his determined attack. Multiple copies of Kevin suddenly surrounded the demon, striking from all sides. The monster noted the difference in their strength, driving the enemy into a hopeless situation. From the smell, he determined that Kevin had never fed on humans, which was why he was so weak. Admiring his courage, the monster offered to remove the restrictive hoop from his head. The monster revealed the reason for Kevin's weakness: his refusal to consume human flesh. The tempter offered Kevin to become the strongest by taking the path of cannibalism. Number 23 was a harsh reminder of the law of exorcism for monsters that feed on humans. At the critical moment, Henry appeared and managed to save Kevin from a fatal blow. Evelina praised number 23's resilience and handed over the rest of the battle to the Devourer. The monster was overjoyed to meet two legendary opponents on the same day. His heart beat faster in anticipation of a battle with worthy opponents. The fistfight between the monster and Henry turned into a furious show of force. Kevin was bitterly aware of his own inferiority as he watched Henry's rapid growth. The girl suggested distracting the monster while Kevin and Henry tried to escape. Toxini still held back his unique ability while Henry's powers were fading. The monster, sensing the weakening blows of the enemy, activated its transformation. His body shrank to the size of a child, causing everyone to be amazed. Henry, realizing the mortal danger, managed to shout to everyone to retreat. The head destruction technique vaporized Henry's skull, leaving everyone in horror. An old collection contains a story about a monster who appeared at a feast. An unkempt boy appeared on the threshold of the mansion, which caused the anger of the arrogant owner. The servants tried in vain to drive away the uninvited guest, but his body was not subject to their power. The brutal blows of the sticks echoed throughout the home, but the boy also remained motionless. The nobleman, realizing the inhuman nature of the guest, prayed for mercy along with the guests. The creature, who called himself Tuok, left the house, leaving everyone in a ghostly relief. Days later, all those present at the feast died from the explosion of their heads. After this, the legend of Tuoksini was born. Evelina rushed towards the decapitated Henry in horror, but number 23 stopped her, taking her by the hand. Doppelganger attacked the monster with a box cutter, turning its power against him. Henry, grabbing his comrades, soared into the sky, escaping from the pursuit of the enraged Tuoksini. Kevin and Evelina desperately held back the monster with explosive talismans and doubles. Exorcist Noah arrived in time to restrain the monster at the request of the true believer. Toxini broke the shackles, forcing Noah to teleport the group to safety. The monster regretted the missed opportunity to absorb the power of 1,000 people at once. At this time, Jason dreamed of a battle with the Devourer, where Yama voluntarily gave up his power to make the monsters disappear. Noah was recovering from the teleportation, regretting his lack of preparation. Evelina worried about the 1,000 lives the monster might have to consume to achieve its goal. Noah called for a focus on developing a Devourer capable of stopping the threat. The Exorcist openly acknowledged the Devourer's weakness in the face of Devanica's power. Kevin was amazed at the rapid growth of the Devourer's power in such a short time. The true believer announced the appointment of Jamal, Ivan, and Jim to exile Tuoksini. She apologized for the risk she had put everyone at with her decision. Kevin dared to ask about the reasons for limiting his training to the doppelganger technique. The true believer sternly reminded him of his intended role as a simple instrument. The monster's words echoed in Kevin's head, who spoke of the path to power through the absorption of people. Jason watched his classmates planning a shopping trip. After a month of contemplating monsters, he learned to distinguish between soul eaters and flesh eaters. Most of the creatures were content with the souls, without harming the bodies of the victims. The man-eating monsters always emitted the smell of blood, revealing their true nature. This thought was deeply ingrained in the young man's mind, changing his perception of the world around him. A true believer explains the rarity of man-eating monsters. This is because they automatically fall under the Exorcist's sights. The woman noted Jason's unique gift of seeing the true form of monsters. The unusual structure of Jason's soul interested the true believer as an object of study. The woman promised to pick up a protective talisman after defeating Devanica. Jason reflected on the incredible transformation of the fearful Henry into a demon hunter. Suddenly, he smelled blood, signaling the approach of a monster. In a panic, Jason tried to warn passengers about the impending threat, but he was defeated and taken for a madman. The man who appeared cold-bloodedly swallowed 926 people, saying he was getting closer to his target of 1,000 victims. The monster became interested in Jason's ability to detect his hidden disguise. The monster threatened to rip his head off, demanding that he reveal the secret of his unique gift. The sudden appearance of hellfire forced the monster to cut off its own hand. The creature was amazed to learn of the power of King Yama, the sole owner of this fire. Jason, who has the gift of seeing the true nature of monsters, finds himself in danger. The Orthodox warned about the danger of revealing the gift, desired by both exorcists and their enemies. The monster, who had almost reached the goal of absorbing 1,000 souls, encountered an obstacle. Ivan received a report of a monster in the R21 metro area and called the team to action. Jim refused to exorcise the monster in the subway, foreseeing the mass death of passengers. The exorcist calculated that the monster would still reach its target of 1,000 victims before they arrived. Jim shocked Ivan by offering to let the mass murderer fight Devanica. A dispute broke out between the exorcists about human lives versus saving humanity. The confrontation between Ivan and Jim escalated into a brutal fight under Jamal's gaze. Jamal, tired of the argument, activated the ability to rewind 7 minutes back. After the time reset, Jamal unexpectedly supported Jim's plan. After immobilizing Ivan with sleeping pills, Jamal admitted to using the ability tenfold, explaining this due to the partner's inability to communicate. The exorcists allowed the monsters to wear themselves out in battle in order to destroy them both. Jim appreciated the practicality of Jamal's ability to eliminate the need for explanations. Meanwhile, Jason looked at his hands, not understanding the nature of the flame that had appeared. The ability to rewind time became a factor in making a radical decision. The exorcist's plan took on a new form, to let the monsters destroy each other in battle. Jason finds himself caught up in a whirlwind of events, discovering within himself the power of hellfire. Monster knocking down Jason, recognized in him a part of the soul of King Yama, the link between the worlds. The boy turned out to be the human reincarnation of Yama, left over from the absorption. The monster promised to take him to hell after defeating Devanica for the sake of order. Devanica suddenly attacked the monster, mockingly noting the noisiness of his bloody meal. The monster, taken by surprise, tried to utter the deadly word, but Devourer covered his mouth with her hair. Memories of a past life surfaced in Jason's mind. As King Yama, the cursed ruler of hell, the old soul of the sinner regularly visited Yama, telling stories about life and justice. This man, despite his good intentions of killing villains, ended up in the hellish kingdom. Yama was amazed at the soul's questions about the justice of the heavenly law against murder. His soul dreamed of severe punishment, preferring destruction to eternal torment in hell. The king of Yama saw in this soul a 1,000-year-old sinner, but found solace in their conversations. The old soul dreamed of a cold hell, considering the heat a light punishment for his sins. Yama, cherishing his only interlocutor, listened with interest to the news from the world of the living. The memories revealed Jason's true nature as the reincarnation of the ruler of the underworld. The confrontation between Devanica and the monster has entered a new phase of awakening the power of Yama. Devanica's hair, recognizing its deadly nature. The spoken word tuak began to swell the demoness's head, but she dragged the monster under the water with her hair. The king of monsters, who has mastered martial arts, does not need words to use techniques. The demoness's assistant, leaning against the monster's ear underwater, uttered the fatal word, after which he instantly blew his head off. The monster recognized Devanica as the strongest opponent. After the Devourer, the disturber of the world balance, the demoness grabbed a subway train with her hair, using it as a weapon against her opponent. The monster desperately tried to save Jason, recognizing him as the reincarnation of King Yama. Divanitsa, having tied the monster with her hair, studied with interest the man he was protecting. The hellfire that engulfed Jason's body revealed his true identity as the reincarnation of King Yama. Jason's memory flashed back to a conversation with a soul who was puzzled about the fate of the villain killer. King Yama showed the soul a mirror of past lives, which revealed the truth about the countless sacrifices. Divanika, smiling, woke up Jason, reporting the escape of a monster frightened by her appearance. Each reincarnation of the soul retained an unchanging desire to destroy evil, like a curse. The mirror of past lives revealed the truth about the soul that made endless sacrifices to heaven. The demoness, left alone with the reincarnation of Yama, prepared for the long-awaited meeting. The demoness, finding herself with Jason, demanded to know the reason for his absorption by the Devourer. The mirror of the past revealed the true essence of the soul, a priest who offered countless human sacrifices to the gods. The heavenly gods turned out to be the true masters of the bloody harvest. And the monsters are just scavengers in their cruel game. Yama realized his 1,000-year-long complicity in deception, judging souls by the laws of the false heavens. The monster emerged from the water after escaping. He understood the need to consume tens of thousands of souls to counter the horror. Jamal found an exhausted Tuoxini, but Henry's sudden appearance changed the situation. An enraged Henry demanded Jason's location from the monster. He demonstrated his unprecedented strength. Tuxini tried to blow up the Devourer's head, but his technique was powerless against Henry's fury. Every mention of his friend's death increased Henry's power, fueled by hatred. The monster realized that the true source of the Devourer's power was not the absorption of souls, but hatred. Henry, ready to be devoured, thought. He doubted the monster's ability to defeat the demoness even after hundreds of thousands of victims. Tuxini gave up and took human form. He recognized the Devourer as the only hope for saving the world. Jamal and Jim watched the standoff, ready to put their plan into action. Henry's hatred for his friend's killer became the catalyst for his incredible growth in power. The fate of the world lay in the hands of the Devourer, whose power was fed by the source of rage. There were two castes of man-eating monsters in hell, ordinary hunters and supreme devourers of sinful souls. The king of monsters has rebelled against the higher beings. He gathered an army of 100,000 followers. The demon Asura mocked the rebels. He then separated his finger, giving it a human appearance. A single finger of a high demon destroyed an army of rebellious monsters. Tuxini, escaping from horror, tore off his own head and fled to the world of people, hiding from the power of Asura. In the demoness, he recognized the very same finger of Asura that had come to haunt him centuries later. Tuxini confessed to Henry that Jason had been captured by a demoness and offered his strength to save his friend. The monster voluntarily gave itself up to be consumed by the Devourer. He begged for forgiveness for the victims of the past. Evelina rushed to report on Henry's merger with Tuoxini, preparing for a new stage of confrontation. Kevin continued his grueling training, realizing the futility of trying to achieve the power of the Devourer. The true believer came to Kevin with a final, fateful task, telling him to become part of the Devourer's power. She revealed the true purpose of number 23, to be food for the final battle with the demoness. The barrier around the meeting place sealed Kevin's fate, created only as a tool. Kevin recalled his childhood attempt. He wanted to give the faithful a homemade flower on Parents' Day. The faithful woman cruelly rejected the gift, explaining that she was not his mother, and its recognition can only be achieved through training. The boy trained hard every day. He sought to become a useful tool for his mentor, remembering the first praise for banishing a monster. The praise strengthened his desire to become stronger for her approval. The true believer ordered Kevin to accept his fate and become food for the battle with the demoness. Kevin's attempts to save himself using doppelganger technology were in vain, especially against the one who taught him this art. The true believer deliberately provoked Kevin to attack, but the boy refused to harm her. With tears in her eyes, she admitted that she had kept the remains of the gift all these years. The woman wounded her heart without thinking, begging Kevin to break the first rule and consume her. She consoled the sobbing boy with the promise of continuing to exist inside him. The demoness told Jason about the chaos in hell after his disappearance and her plan to become the new goddess. The Union's exorcists lined up in front of the modest warehouse where the demoness lived. Jin was surprised by the modesty of the demoness's dwelling, expecting to see a luxurious palace. The terrifying energy of the monsters shook the bodies of the exorcists, coming not from the warehouse but from behind their backs. The Devourer appeared and ordered the exorcists to step aside. He intended to save his friend. Behind the open doors, the exorcists discovered a system of 8 warehouses instead of the expected one. Isabella recognized a special technique for recreating spaces. Inside, everything obeys the rules of the creator. There were 2 ways to escape: by solving the established rules or by destroying their creator. Robert used his powerful neural cannon on the warehouses, but even she couldn't leave a single scratch on the walls. Ivan, not listening to Isabella's warnings, resolutely moved toward the first door. The newly opened spaces turned out to be even stranger than the previous rooms. James pointed to the number of warehouses which exactly matched the number of exorcists. Everyone understood the demoness's plan to divide and destroy each exorcist individually. Jamal assured his friends of safety. His power allowed him to rewind time by 30 seconds. Marcus suggested using his ability to safely survey each warehouse. A frightened Noah suddenly demanded that Jamal rewind time. He noticed Henry's absence from their group. Marcus, who turned out to be the creator of the space, interfered with Jamal. Before he could clap his hands, he cut off his hand. The first-class monster revealed himself and explained that he had always been among people. Ivan realized with bitterness how Marcus had hidden his demonic energy for so long during their missions. However, he was surprised that Marcus was killing his own kind. But he knew that people also killed people for fun. The demon appeared and tightly tied up Noah, who was trying to escape. She declared it to be the key to opening the gates to hell. At a critical moment, Noah managed to escape, but had to leave his friends in danger. Isabella immediately attacked with a special bullet of love and grace. It could be used 6 times a day, but using the bullet 6 times would send a person to hell. Robert transformed into a combat satellite by activating a super small thermonuclear reactor. The demoness attacked back and a huge explosion occurred. But Ivan protected everyone with a mushroom shield made of his blood. The size of the protective mushroom was proportional to the amount of blood Ivan had lost. Despite Robert's powerful explosion, the demoness remained unharmed in the form of the Asura's finger. Ivan, a first-rank exorcist, was frustrated by his fear of the monster. Jim promised to forget his momentary weakness and ordered the others to be taken away. He was confident in the outcome of the battle, preparing to use his special ability. His gift allowed him to take over the body of any human character from the game he had completed. Jim attacked the Asura's finger, but the demoness remained unharmed. He mockingly suggested that the demoness surrender, boasting of his experience in such battles. Henry ended up in another space where he met a frightened Kylie. The girl begged to be saved, not knowing how she ended up there after waking up. Suddenly, the very flowers that killed the first devourer appeared from Kylie's mouth. Henry realized that a monster had possessed the girl, but its vines were quite weak. He offered to absorb Kylie to destroy the monster that had taken up residence within her. However, the strange weakness of the cosmic monster aroused Henry's suspicions. After absorbing the girl, Henry felt the power of the mysterious flower. Marcus, who was watching what was happening, remembered the demoness's promise. She promised to make him a superior monster in exchange for the devourer. The demoness was distracted from the fight, noticing her slightly severed wing. Jim promised to cut off her head with the next blow, but she deftly dodged it. With each attack, he became slower and slower, not understanding the reason for his weakness. It turned out that the whole time the demoness had been skillfully pretending to evade. In fact, she was absorbing his energy from a distance. Jim watched in rage as his body rapidly deteriorated into that of an old man. Jim's final attack proved fatal for him, his body flying into pieces. Ivan quickly created a mushroom golem by soaking the ground with blood from his cut hand. The demoness, wielding the sword of the absorbed Jim, easily destroyed the mushroom creature. Ivan realized the terrible truth. By absorbing people, she received their abilities. With a lightning-fast movement, the demoness cut through Ivan's body, preparing to absorb his power. A frightened Isabella remembered the events predicted by the true believer. Isabella had one last hope: the technique of the egg of love and grace. She asked Jamal to kill himself if he failed, knowing that he would die soon. The technique gave a 10% chance to seal the creature with the resurrection symbol. The cost of use was high: complete destruction of body and soul after 666 seconds. Robert, being a mechanism, tried to delay the demoness from attacking Isabella. However, this did not help because the demoness cleverly used Noah's teleportation. She could take over the ability even without absorbing it completely. She deliberately hid her true strength so that her enemies would not choose a quick death. Isabella tried to shoot herself, but the demoness was faster. Looking at the evaporating corpse, the demoness realized that Isabella's life had always belonged to her. Having gathered the strength of all the victims, the demoness prepared to carry out her sinister plan. Noah suddenly returned and was shocked to see that he was too late to save his friends. The demoness was surprised by his return, assuming that he would be the last course. But she smelled the scent of a higher monster and saw Kevin in front of her. He reminded the demoness of his true identity, number 23 of the exile group. Kevin cried, not wanting to absorb the true believer. But she called herself just a tool that had served for 300 years. So now she wanted number 23 to use her. The demoness threatened to destroy anyone in her path, even number 23. Kevin stopped her attack and demanded to show the full power that threatens humanity. He attacked the demoness with incredible speed, giving her no chance to catch her breath. Kevin remembered how as a child, he asked the true believer to teach him new techniques. He was already tired of creating clones and he wanted to know how many clones were needed to become a master. But she explained, true mastery is not in the number of clones. It is in the creation of one single perfect copy. Little Kevin thought this task was impossible, but the true believer believed in his strength. After all, she created him, giving him all the necessary qualities. The devastating attack of the doppelgangers deprived the demoness of her wings in a matter of seconds. Noah was amazed by the power of the great hero's blood flowing through Kevin's veins. The demoness admitted that she had already rewound time 10 times, but the battle always lasted 7 minutes. She offered Kevin a real fight after opening the gates of hell if he survived. The demoness began to disappear, and Noah managed to grab number 23 to leave this place. Entities burst out from her body, opening 666 gates throughout the world. They were located in a variety of places: London, Tokyo, Paris. Monsters emerged from the craters and began to devour people in different cities. Evelina ordered all exile groups to prepare for the highest level of hellish danger. Upon learning of the death of the first-rank exorcists, she ordered them to save people at the cost of their own lives. Although in her heart she understood, there was no chance of salvation. Jason woke up and realized that the gates were open, and recognized the demoness as the Asura herself. He warned, the Creator will burn the spoiled crops along with the pests. The demoness revealed her true plan. She wanted to use the Devourer to destroy the Creator himself. The opening of the gates and the destruction of humanity were only a bait for the appearance of God. When the Creator dies, she will be able to create her own ideal world. The Devourer, created by infusing a spirit into a plant, surpassed all its predecessors. The demoness could now kill him by causing deadly flowers to bloom at her will. But the demoness had no intention of absorbing the Devourer. She wanted to make him hate the Celestials, and she had a way. 300 years ago, a deer monster created hybrids of humans and gods, and some of them survived. If the Devourer hates hybrids, then he will hate deities too. Grabbing Yama, she explained that he would become an instrument for this hatred. She soon thanked Marcus for his help. Showing Yama, she offered him to eat the almost dead king as a reward. Thanks to him, he could become a superior monster. The demoness's assistants were jealous that King Yama went to Marcus and not to them. Dracula explained that Jason, the body's host, was the offspring of a celestial human hybrid. He thought that Yama was much more useful to the demon, but she just smiled. Henry woke up to see Marcus devouring his friend. Tears streamed down Henry's cheeks as he realized his powerlessness to protect his friend. He killed the monster, but his friend could no longer be saved. The demoness wanted the Devourer to remember this feeling of helplessness well. A week has passed since the opening of the gates of hell. The Exorcists continued to protect people, but their powers gradually faded. The monsters and the Devourer grew stronger as they devoured more and more victims. The Devourer has learned to absorb monsters from a distance. He could control and clear several areas at once. Kevin noticed the gates of hell widening, heralding the arrival of higher monsters. They had to find and kill the demoness before the gates fully opened. Kevin has uncovered the main threat, the demoness's ability to rewind time. Henry realized that the only way to win was to kill the demoness instantly. Kevin was worried that her only chance of winning would disappear if she managed to turn back time. A blinding light from an intercontinental nuclear missile suddenly appeared in front of the boy. The demoness, leaving in the car, realized that the heavens had begun to act earlier than expected. She ordered the reapers to gather the last harvest. This means the Creator will come with new seeds. An hour before, at the American headquarters, An aide had begged the gentleman not to press the red button. The Lord believed that the remaining people should become a sacrifice to cleanse the sacred garden. The aide tried to delegate launch authority to the defense minister, but in the end, he only got a bullet in the head. The Reapers in China, Russia, and India have already carried out the order to launch all nuclear missiles. The president, having prayed for the acceptance of the victims, pressed the button to launch missiles at the megacities. Henry decided to absorb the rocket with his body, hoping to save at least someone. Kevin warned that the Devourer might not survive being swallowed by a nuclear missile. Henry still rushed towards the rocket, not wanting to see more deaths of his friends. After absorbing the missile, a monstrous explosion occurred in Henry's body. Kevin picked up the bleeding Henry, recognizing him as the world's only hope. Henry was happy to save people, but soon they saw new rockets in the sky. Kevin realized his powerlessness in the face of the launch of 4,000 nuclear missiles. As a result, 85% of humanity died at the time of the nuclear attack. A month later, the few survivors were still trying to escape the prowling monsters. The older brother found a barrel and begged the younger one to hide there. The boy cried, not wanting to leave his brother alone in the face of danger. The older brother yelled at the younger one, demanding that he hide in the barrel until sunrise. He ordered his brother not to respond to anyone's voice, no matter who called him. Realizing the inevitability of his death, he remembered his promise to his parents to protect his younger brother. The monster that found him appeared around the corner. He offered the boy a quick death if he would stop resisting. The older brother ran away from the shelter, trying to lead the monster away. But the beast, stretching out his hand, caught the boy and promised him a painful death. The younger brother, despite the prohibition, jumped out of the barrel and rushed at the monster. A man suddenly appeared and with one blow of his cane made the monster dissolve. The frightened brothers mistook the stranger for an exorcist and thanked him for saving them. The man became interested in the notebook that the younger boy was holding tightly in his hands. The brothers talked about their parents' drawings. They replaced the photographs that were burned during the fire. The older brother also shared his dream of becoming a comic book illustrator. Now he waited for the world to return to normal. A man told a story about his painting being ruined by a dog. He admitted that in his anger he had spoiled a little more, and 85% of the picture was ruined. The boy understood the stranger's feelings, saying that he too often ruined his drawings out of anger. The man admitted that despite his age, he remained just as impatient. He asked the boy whether he would fix the damaged painting or start a new one. The boy decided that he would paint a new picture. The sight of the spoiled one caused mental pain. He believed that the new picture could turn out even better than the previous one. The man was interested in this advice and asked to see the parents' drawings in the notebook. The boy proudly held the picture drawn by his brother, and the old man thought about the destruction of souls, but decided to preserve the brothers as a memory of humanity. The boys found themselves in a space where they saw their living parents preparing their favorite dishes. They cried with happiness when they met their parents. On the ground, their bodies slowly melted. The Creator hoped for their happiness in their own world, as the last representatives of humanity. Now was the time to act. With a blow of his cane, he began to spread the light of extinction, destroying all living beings. The demoness watched through a drone as divine light destroyed the souls of people and monsters. She knew that the light would destroy not only the human world, but also hell. Dracula was worried about their fate, knowing that the light would get to them too. But the demoness believed in the victory of the Devourer over the Creator. A Surreal appeared before them, explaining the special nature of the Devourer as a system error. The demoness suggested that the light would not affect the Devourer due to its unique nature. Although I knew for sure it was not known, it was a hypothesis. Asura chuckled, noting that anyone who claims the position of God must take risks. Looking at the tablet, the demoness saw Henry's arrival and anticipated the outcome of events. Noah delivered the Devourer to the Creator, recognizing this as the limit of his abilities. Henry watched as the mysterious light consumed all living things, destroying people and monsters without a trace. In an hour, the light destroyed half the country, threatening to engulf the entire world in 2 days. He decided to stop the stranger so that the human sacrifices would not be in vain. By using the art of release to its full potential, Henry reached the level of the supreme monsters. Touching the barrier, he confirmed the demoness's hypothesis. The light had no effect on the Devourer. Asura waited for an answer to the main question. Would the Devourer be able to absorb the Creator himself? He offered the demoness to return to her body and become the main finger in 30 years. The demoness refused, demanding that Asura's body be given to her in exchange for the position of chief finger. An enraged Asura attempted to kill her, believing that she had gone mad. He scoffed at her plans, not understanding how a simple finger could defeat him. However, she reminded that Asura also targeted his creator. Asura knew that she didn't stand a chance against him. But the demoness used the technique of the egg of love and grace. The creator watched with interest as Henry remained unharmed within the deadly light. With one movement of his hand, he immobilized the devourer's body, demonstrating his strength. Henry asked about the identity of the man who decided to destroy the entire world. The creator presented himself as the beginning and the end of all that exists, the ruler of the universe. Asura looked at her finger with disdain, thinking that she was senselessly sacrificing her life. He offered her to repent, promising to make her the main finger. But the demoness smiled mysteriously. Her plan with the love egg was successful. An ominous cross appeared in Ashura's hand. Using the power of the Holy Trinity, the demoness trapped the powerful demon inside the egg. She triumphantly explained that the ability to rewind time guaranteed success. Now it remained to be seen whether Henry could defeat God in 600 to 66 seconds. Asura wondered why his part rebelled against him, since they were one. The demoness was lost in her memories. Her human body spoke to her blind father. He sent her as a sacrifice to the sea god, believing that it would help him see. On the ship, cruel sailors mocked her, not believing in the power of sacrifice. Before jumping into the sea, the girl prayed. She didn't want to die, but they threw her into the sea. Then she drowned and prayed not for herself, but for her father's insight. The demoness who appeared revealed the truth to her. People are just food for the gods, like grains of rice. Knowing that she would die, the demoness asked to take her body for herself. The girl smiled, asking the demoness to turn this unfair world into hell. She returned to her father, who was begging for mercy, declaring that she herself would become the new deity. At the moment of Asura's imprisonment, she finally understood the true meaning of liberation. Meanwhile, the creator admired Henry, who was immune to the light of extinction. He recognized the Devourer as the monster that ate King Yama. He was eager to study Henry's soul, using him as a model. By creating a new species over hundreds of thousands of years, he wanted to play with the Devourer. The creator admitted that all his enemies were just toys to amuse himself from eternal boredom. Suddenly, Henry grabbed the creator's hand, becoming the first enemy in billions of years. For the first time, the creator met a creature capable of destroying him. Henry confronted the creator, claiming that he was no different from a monster. By activating a unique gas release technique, he revealed a being that had struck the creator. With cold interest, the creator asked what would happen if he did not destroy people. He predicted the Devourer's fate of eternal loneliness in an empty world after the death of all living things. The creator's words echoed in Henry's memory. They recalled the prophecy of King Yama about his fate. The creator, having taken on a different form, attacked the boy with a crushing blow. He began to change appearances, reminding that he was the absolute in this world. Taking the form of Zeus, he struck him with lightning. Surviving, Henry struck the creator. After all, even the highest monsters could not survive such an attack. Having taken the form of Buddha, the creator intended to crush him, but he was faced with an incredibly accelerated attack of destructive light. He realized that his abilities were being absorbed. The creator decided to erase not only Henry's soul, but his very existence. The creator used the all-seeing head. He learned of an infinite number of possible futures involving the Devourer. In the process, he realized the unpleasant truth. This was their 1000th meeting. Their destinies were inextricably linked each time. Before the final blow, the creator warned Henry of the deception that surrounded him. He hoped that Henry could fix his painting. After the victory, Henry realized something strange. The creator deliberately exposed himself to his deadly attack. These mysterious words reminded him of Steve's prediction about his fate, after which he began to bleed. A demoness found Henry bleeding to death. She noted the irony of a new god dying from a simple plant. When Henry tried to attack, the demoness paralyzed him from a distance. Not wanting to waste time, she took the sphere out of his mouth. Having taken possession of the Devourer's sphere, she felt boundless power. As soon as she swallowed it, she felt the ability to control everything that exists. At that moment, Kevin appeared, intending to kill her. Grabbing it, she remembered the promise to show her true appearance after the gate opened. It was the perfect opportunity to test the new powers of the ruler of the universe. Under her watchful gaze, Kevin began to disappear, becoming the first victim of her power. The Devourer, being a creation of God, was immune to the light of extinction. The demoness was unable to use her light despite the deadly plant in his body. Kevin, standing before disappearing, revealed the truth about his training in the only technique. His grandmother spent her entire life grooming him to create the perfect clone. all in order to feed the Devourer. Henry, already possessing Kevin's powers, used the element of surprise against the demoness. Holding tightly onto the demoness's hand, Kevin begged Henry to destroy her quickly. An hour before, having seen the all-consuming light, they had been hastily thinking over a rescue plan. Kevin insisted on passing on his powers through a clone, but this threatened to drain his energy, so Henry was against it. He explained that the power of cloning given to the faithful would help in the battle with the demoness. Henry made Kevin swear to survive, not wanting to lose another close friend. Now looking at Kevin disappearing, he realized that he had failed to keep his promise. He hoped to save him with divine power. But first he wanted to kill the demoness. But she explained, even God is not able to resurrect completely destroyed souls. She enjoyed watching his despair, that she deliberately confessed to killing all his friends. As she died, the demoness recalled her promise to turn the world into hell. Her last act was the light of extinction. It instantly swallowed the planet, even heaven and hell. Henry's double was left in the empty universe as a new god. He failed to save a single living soul. He couldn't even save himself. In absolute solitude, he thought about the millions who had died, and also their inability to prevent it. The power of the eaten monsters lasted only for a day. This means that Henry's double will soon lose his abilities and disappear. Possessing divine powers, the double wanted to create new life before its disappearance. But the words of the Creator echoed in his head. The creation of a new species required hundreds of thousands of years. The double desperately prayed for the appearance of at least someone, a person or a monster. For the remaining hours, he could only mourn his weakness, which had brought the world to complete devastation. With an hour left before his disappearance, his hand regenerated. If it had happened earlier, he would have been able to turn everything back. Thank God it wasn't their first meeting that came into his head. Using all his strength to rewind time, he hoped to go back further than 7 minutes. Suddenly, he found himself in the past, where the Devourer had just devoured King Yama. Henry watched in shock as the scene from 300 years ago began, realizing the chance to change everything. The first Devourer attacked him, surprised at his strength, which surpassed the monsters he knew. Having overcome it, I began to think about what to do with the remaining 30 minutes of existence. The double used an all-seeing gaze. He saw a reality where God kills the Devourer, considering him a nuisance. God knew the Devourer would cause a lot of trouble in the future. But without the Devourer, in 3 years the gates of hell will open. The Creator will appear again and destroy humanity. Henry decided to hide the Devourer from God. He explained to him the impending threat. The Devourer wanted to fight the God, but Henry stopped him. He explained to the monster that he was weak, just like Henry himself, who could not protect anyone. The doppelganger hid the first Devourer in an egg, hoping to keep its power intact. Using the power of the Creator, he found the head of the district praying. He grieved for the people who died of hunger. Henry, with his all-seeing gaze, he understood the meaning of the Creator's words about 1,000 recurring meetings. The future did not change. Giving the Devourer to the old man meant repeating the cycle for the 1,000th time. Having descended to the ground, the double approached Steve. He explained to him the futility of his hatred of the indifferent heavens. Henry looked for other futures, but they were even darker. In 3 years, the gates of hell would still open. Even if Asura was killed, a new higher monster would appear and repeat the fate. If you tell Steve everything, he will die at the hands of Asura, stopping him. With 15 minutes to live, he was ready to repeat everything and save the world for 300 years. His grandfather's voice in his stomach asked him not to give up. It was like a whisper of the wind, but it made the double hesitate for a moment. In those seconds, he learned about a boy named Henry, Tom, who died here from hunger half a day ago. The Devourer realized that he had appeared when Yama was alive and was waiting for him in hell. A soul appeared looking for King Yama. That same boy, the ancient soul who didn't kill anyone this time. He wanted to tell his old friend how he died of hunger. The double explained that King Yama was no more. The boy was sad because Yama protected him until the end, allowing him to be reborn. Henry realized that he himself was that ancient soul who failed to thank King Yama. Even after Yama was reborn, he found him and protected him until the end. With tears in his eyes, Henry found a way to change the future. Opening his mouth to the soul, he put power into the mouth of the dead boy. Now he had to eat monsters and defecate them. This would create a new King Yama equal in power to the old one, restoring the balance of power.